stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 28th, 2013 Board of Commissioners meeting. I apologize that we were a little late in executive session. And we have a light agenda tonight, so for those of you who come to all these meetings, you have earned it, and enjoy it, because we have some whoppers coming up next month. So hopefully we'll be short and sweet and get to watch some baseball tonight. Do we have any public participation?
Hi, my name is Diane Edbrill. I live at 205 Spruce Tree Road in the 2nd Ward. I noticed that there's an item on the consent agenda about the parking meters, and I wanted to talk about that briefly, so I guess this is as good a time as any since it won't be discussed.
Well, I believe one of my colleagues is going to have it.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, then I'll save my comments for when it's discussed.
Great.
Good evening, Sarah Armstrong, Radnor resident, and public comment tonight. I wanted to make a brief comment about the article in the paper addressing the alarmist rumors about our Drawson. Rumors, yes. Alarmist, no. August 14th, 4 commissioners to vote yes on this open space purchase this October. So August 14th, we're predicting Mr. Spengler sent out a letter on Radnor Township seal letterhead for votes in October. Same letter dated August 21st, 4 commissioners to vote yes on 65-acre open space purchase. A nice long letter from Mr. Spengler. Radnor Township to purchase 65 acres, lots A, B, and C. It's not a rumor, unfortunately, and maybe you didn't know that this was circulating. That's why suddenly everyone is getting alarmed. So, what I'd like to ask the board tonight as we move forward in this process is to consider the 1991, this is our Radnor Township Parks, Rec, and Open Space Plan. In that document, the plan was to establish an open space acquisition fund, which we did in 2006, to purchase parkland. Major acquisitions should be the subject of a referendum. I think that a lot of the rumors, the concerns, the anxiety, especially the concerns about the finances, could be put to bed with a voter referendum. I think the voters deserve it. I think it's what's fair, and I would ask you to consider that as you move forward in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I would like to announce that we had, oh.
I'm a little slow. Good evening, Philip Wilson, 661 Church Road, Wayne. I find it interesting that Sarah brings up the Drawson subject, only because a while ago I had sent to all of you an email back in June to the same subject, only because of, well, Bill's not here, excuse me, Bill Spengler's not here, but he had written in the summer letter, Radnor newsletter, a letter for the commissioners talking about our Drawson, and that it's a subject that's coming up this fall. So it is a very important subject to me. I live in the 3rd Ward. I grew up around the area. I actually traversed the Drawson farmland, probably call it trespassing as a kid. But I did, and I'm very interested in what happens with it, as all of you are, and I'm sure all the rest of the township is. It's a big deal. And you guys have acknowledged that, and that's really important. What, as I outlined in the email to you guys, and we had a conversation, and Elaine, you were very helpful in explaining the position of the board and where you are in terms of following the procedures. And I'm seeing more and more conversation about our Drawson and that it's coming to the fold. I'm concerned that it may happen faster than the public can even get a grasp of it. And I know there's a lot of big things that we've been talking about collectively as the township, such as the stormwater fees, and you've all taken great care to make sure that the public knows what's going on. And that's all I'd like to see here. I want our Drajan, I want the view shed to remain. I want just what I see today, just what I trespassed many years ago on. But I also know that change is a-coming. And, you know, we've seen it everywhere. So what my point in being here tonight is, Elaine, you outlined that we're going to follow the resolution that was passed in January 28th of this year. And I believe that, and I want to see that. I just want to make sure that where we are in that process, and that if the board can kind of advise me, or us, the public, where we are in the process. There's a phase 1, there's a phase 2. And the phase 1 is in the Open Space Committee, working with the Board of Commissioners, and it outlines what potential open spaces that are under consideration. And it describes it. There's a 3-page worksheet that goes along with phase 1. And then there's a phase 2. It's well outlined, well detailed, makes all kinds of sense. What I'd like to make sure and ask, I don't know how to ask it other than right here and then maybe a follow-up, is where are we in that process? Where specifically are we in that process? Have we filled out worksheet A? Are we in phase 1? Have we progressed to phase 2? And I know there's things going on in the executive session. I was privy to, Don, your email to your constituents, those that are following your communiques. And in there you outlined that conversations are going on. So I know stuff is going on. We all know that stuff is going on, as Mrs. Armstrong pointed out. What I don't want to see is it come and go so fast that none of us have a chance to react. So I want to make sure, A, we're following procedure, B, where are we in the procedure, and C, what kind of timeframes are we talking about, so that we all can react. It's a big purchase. It's a big deal. Because when I participated in the CBFAC, one of our recommendations was to put a moratorium on open space acquisitions. And on the other side is to consider selling some of the existing open space to maybe fund other projects, other needs that we have in the township. And one of the pushbacks to that recommendation was, we can't sell open space. It's not as easy as buying it. It's a big deal. It's a bigger deal to get rid of it than to buy it. That tells me that we have to be even more diligent in considering our acquisitions from this point on. So what I want to make sure, again, I'm just repeating myself, is that we're following procedure. We, all of us, and that we're all apparently aware of the transparency of the process, and that we all have a chance to say what's going on with it and have our input. We're not all going to agree. I'm going to be the first to vote for it if it makes sense. You know, I don't know what makes sense. As I pointed out to you, there's 2 parts to every purchase. One is what the product is, and 2, what's the price. So then everybody gets to do a value evaluation. I can't do that. I've seen, we've all seen information flying around, and one person saying one thing, one person saying another. Me, I would just like facts. And then that's what I do as a business. I provide to my clients factual information so that they can make a good cost-benefit analysis. It's up to them how they make the choice, but at least they have the facts. That's all I want. So I'd ask, is there, the question to the board, or maybe to the township staff, is how do I know, how do I find out, how do I ask where we are in that procedure and get a definitive official answer?
I will give you a definitive official answer right now. First of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for pursuing this. I recognize that it is frustrating that you don't have all the facts right now, and it's frustrating for everybody involved. We are following the open space acquisition policy to a T. It has been in front of the Open Space Committee. They have made a recommendation. They have filled out the worksheets. It has been in front of the Executive Committee of the Board of Commissioners. We are nearing the conclusion of the negotiations, and terms will in the next week or so, in the first half of November, I believe we will have something to present as a potential acquisition. When that happens, every piece of documentation, everything will be on the website. There's nothing that will be held back. And we'll have a special page so that when you go to the front page, you click on Ardrossan, and it'll call up everything, and it'll be in categories, and you can look at all of the documentation. Then, after that happens, there will be an introduction of an ordinance. That will probably be mid-November. Then we will have hearings. And I think we have all come to a spot where we want to have those hearings separately, not with another meeting, because they may be long, and it's hard to stay here till 1 o'clock in the morning. So we'll probably schedule at least 2 special meetings that are not on a Board of Commissioners night. Then we will see where we are. If we feel like we've come to a good place and we're rehashing the same things over and over, we'll move forward after that and schedule it for an adoption or rejection. Just so you know, once it goes public and once we enter it, that's phase 2. So simultaneous to that public discussion we're having, in our open space acquisition policy, there are certain analyses that will be going on within our staff and within our CARFAC that will also inform our decision. So that is the schedule. I don't have a definite end time for you because we don't know how the public discourse is going to go. And we'd like to remain flexible to that. So
my sense is the most important thing to get what I hear you saying you want is an adequate amount of time between when it's introduced and when it's before the Board of Commissioners for action. And the target is the time frame that Elaine identified. If that time frame is insufficient, then we need to hear that from the public so that we can extend that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that part of not knowing that time frame is not knowing how long it would take for adequate evaluation from the public. Is that fair? So if that amount of time is inadequate, then we need to hear that from you so that we can extend that time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's time and transparency. So that, thank you very much. That's exactly what I needed to hear because I didn't understand, and that makes it perfectly clear. So yes, what the schedule is to have enough time to react to it as the public. I won't be bashful. I mean, I'm really interested in where this goes and how it goes. But you also have to have the information to be helpful in the process. Rather than, I don't want to be a hindrance. I want to add to. We have so much information and wonderful resources right here in the township to help with this decision and to look at it. I'd like to put it all together to make the best decision for Radnor. So yes, Don, I agree with that. But it also has to be all the documents, as you said. And as soon as that gets up on the website, that's awesome.
It will really help all the consternation. Oh, yeah. It really will. Okay, well, thank you very much for your comments.
Anybody else?
Any other comments?
Al Phelan. I'd like to ask you, has there been any appraisals made of this parcel that you're going to be purchasing? Or are you just,
Yes.
I've heard Mr. Springler tell me as early as August that the township was willing to pay $12 million. And are you relying on the appraisal, the real estate appraisal of Edgar Scott, or are you relying on an appraisal that you people have received from a qualified MAI appraiser?
We have qualified MAI several appraisals, and they will all be on the website, posted in their entirety.
I see. And the other thing is in regards to the development of the balance of the Ardrossan estate. On all other occasions where you've developed Ravenscliffe and you've also developed, Ravenscliffe was developed and Inbury, there was no money given to those developers, were there, to get open space?
All of those subdivisions took advantage of our density modification, and they developed to the capacity of their allowance.
And if we're doing the density modification now, couldn't we not end up by telling the owners that which portions we want for open space made down by Darby Paoli Road and Newton Road?
Yes, we absolutely could.
And has that been considered?
If we wanted maximum density, which is about 170 houses.
Well, has that been considered at all?
I, 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 I think we can have that conversation during when we debate whether to buy this, if people would
Well,
rather
I'm just
have.
asking you now, has that been considered
Of course it's
in
been
the
considered.
negotiations?
Yes.
Because I've understood, and I've developed the Yellow School site where the ARCO Research Office Center was there, and we got demands for this and for that, but we never demanded that we had to be paid money for open space and a density modification. We ended up by willingly give everything that we had, and we ended up by doing it gladly because we knew we were going to be living with the neighbors and we wanted to have them enjoy us as a neighbor. That included Mr. DuPont, who I had to meet directly. I understand now that Mr. Roush has bought the DuPont estate, and he has, notwithstanding all the requirements that Newtown Township has put on him, he is required to also have certain things put in houses and no aluminum and certain other things. But he is giving and deeding to the township over 45 acres and developing a park in there and everything else. I don't hear anything that the estate is doing. And I think that's something that we should consider. Furthermore, I went down to the township and I went to the clerk and I asked for all the papers in regards to the development of the Drossen estate. I could not find any signature of any of the owners as to making the application. And then when I came to the hearings, they all referred to Mr. Scott, and I haven't seen anything that says Mr. Scott can bind the owners. I would suggest that you look back in your papers and see if you can find such. I thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I would just like to clarify, it's not Rouse that owns that land, it's Toll Brothers. And
I beg to pardon with you. You are wrong, unquestionably wrong, because I talked to Mr. Rouse as early as last Friday. He owns the property. He entered into a contract with Toll Brothers to build the improvements. So I'd beg to differ with you, Elaine.
And there are over 400 units, which is what they built out to their capacity to get that open space. And that's always an option. You can always allow your developers to build to capacity
So
to,
one thing though, Elaine, I disagree with your position. I mean, what I heard you imply was that if we don't purchase this property, it will be built to capacity. And I don't believe that that's accurate.
okay, well, we'll have that discussion when the time comes. Okay, this is public comment, and we're going to go ahead and take the next comment. Thank you very much for your
There's one other
comments
thought.
today.
Well, I'll come back with that thought.
Great,
Thank you.
thanks.
My name is Chet Harrington. I live at 757 Newtown Road, Villanova. I've been a resident for 47 years at that address, and very interested in all the things that are going on around the Drossen question. First of all, I sent you a letter, and all the commissioners got it, as did all the other committees, asking for an extension of time, in that there are so many things, the ancillary things that go on with the purchase of a property, including stormwater and traffic and all of the elements that need to be studied, including price. And I assume that at some point in time, you said that there were appraisals. I'd like to know the dates of those appraisals, what year, what date, what time those appraisals were given, and how much the appraisals were for. Is that public knowledge at this time?
It will be in about 2 weeks.
Why is it not public now?
It is part of the negotiations that are going on.
Just a moment. Just a moment. You said it's part of the negotiations? Appraisals are made on the property when the property becomes available. Before you start negotiating, you should have an appraisal, and the public should know what that appraisal is before you negotiate. I think the taxpayers are owed that. If you disagree, I think the taxpayers have a question. The other question is that the traffic study that was submitted recently was very questionable, I'll put it that way, because it was done in July, a time when traffic was very, very little. And having lived there for 47 years, I can tell you that it was not a study that I would say will stand up very long if there's another study made, and another study should be made when the roads become open again. Right now, we're shut down. The Darby-Paoli Road is shut down, and the Newtown traffic is accumulating, and everybody's cutting through Abraham's Lane, making it almost impossible to get back and forth to Newtown Road. It's been very difficult. And I think that's a major problem. And I think the township should request PennDOT, who is responsible for the property, to do another study. We'll certainly put some pressure on PennDOT, whether you do or not. And lastly, I think the taxpayers are adamant that the facts become public. And we hope that you will understand that there's more than rumor going on, and your explanation was fine, except the rumors have been extended for some time. Well, I ask your patience, and I think that you should also consider an extension of time to make this decision. I don't think it should be made in a hurry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Is there any other public comment?
Diane Edbrill, Spruce Tree Road in the Second Ward. I just want to take this opportunity to remind everyone that nothing happens in a vacuum, and that at the same time that this potential real estate deal is being discussed, and whether it goes to a public referendum, which I certainly hope it does, or not, there are other things happening in the township that will be affected by it and that will affect it. And on behalf of the Second Ward, I want to point out that, it seems in a sense that the township is acting inconsistently. On the one hand, wanting to preserve open space and limit density in one corner of the township, but in another part of the township, really, we have to be very watchful, because I know in the Second Ward right now, in the property that's currently owned by Biomed Realty, there's an ordinance that has been proposed, that has been discussed by this board as well as the Planning Commission, to pass an ordinance to greatly increase the density of a commercial development at that site. And that's a site that's on the other end of the township. It's, certainly in a much more commercial district than Ardrossan, but it is in a place where most of the Second Ward lives and has to drive by. And, it's important for a township to foster some amount of commercial development, because a healthy commercial environment reduces the tax burden on the private residents in the community. But let's not deal with these things one over here and one over here as though they don't affect each other, because presumably if the township does end up purchasing some portion of the Ardrossan estate to retain as open space, we will become indebted for it. We will have to pay for that somehow, and we're going to be looking to our commercial tenants to help foot the bill so that we don't have to ask our residential landowners for that money, to pay that debt. And so I just hope that when, as these things are moving down their tracks, parallel tracks, that there's some effort made to deal with all of this development, potential, commercial, residential, in a comprehensive way. I think that Mr. Booker on one or two occasions has talked about revisiting the comprehensive plan, and I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think that Ardrossan, the commercial development in the Second Ward, and the CIDC proposed for Villanova are all three things that need to be looked at comprehensively, because altogether they do affect one another in positive and negative ways. And so I hope that everyone takes a deep breath and a step back and tackles these things in a leisurely and thoughtful manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Is there any other public comment?
Madam President, if I may, just before Mr. Booker speaks, just to Diane's point, Ardrossan, in trying to tie the two together, I would take exception to, because I think they are completely separate. They're different. You have one that deals with business development within a corporate designated area of redevelopment that will go dormant in that particular area. Then you talk about Ardrossan that is completely residential. However, Biomed has been in the pipeline and being worked through, which is well over a year, probably almost 15 months. So it hasn't happened overnight. So I think that process has continued on. So I just want to not try to confuse the two. because I think they are separate, and I think they both have to be dealt separately, because one deals with long-term benefit and health and the maintenance of real estate taxes. One has one that is actually, you look at an expense. So I think the two are different, so.
I don't agree with you. I will agree with Diane. They're not independent of one another.
Right. I mean-
In the sense of you're looking at preserving quality of life at one end of the township and creating a detrimental effect at another end, and it comes down to an insatiable appetite on the behalf of government for money. Because that's what the development of biomed is all
It's all going to end up on the
about.
same balance sheet
Okay,
at the end of the day.
let's not debate where this is public comment, and we're just taking your opinions.
Just if I may, just with Kevin's thing.
Can't resist, can you?
I can't. Sorry, I can't let it go. Because I think it's part of this.
Especially my choice of words.
Ay,
Perfectly.
ay, ay, ay.
Well, just from the perspective of, from the administration side, you look at something where you don't go to the taxpayer all the time. It's too easy to go to the taxpayer and say, we'll raise taxes so we can do things. Where when you're presented with an opportunity of redevelopment, where we're not creating something different or new that's in that business park, you're actually just transforming that. So again, I think we'll agree, we'll disagree on that
Yeah,
particular
we'll disagree
one.
because
So we'll-
I'll
Understood.
view it as an indirect tax.
And understood. Any other public comment, please?
Yes, getting back to the Ardrossan issue. In the article that was in Patch this weekend, Elaine, you wrote, once the proposed terms are settled and the seller has signed a proposed agreement, the public process of deliberation will begin. And I don't think I need to tell you that when a seller signs a form of agreement and you have their terms are settled, you have constructively agreed to the transaction. While there might be some sort of a ratification of the final terms and conditions of the contract, you know it's purely up to the Board of Commissioners to take the final vote to consummate the deal. And what you hear the people here talking about is they're concerned that there's not going to be any opportunity for a substantive evaluation and assessment of the people of the township with respect to this transaction. You've already said it. You've obtained appraisals, negotiated the amount and the price of the land to be acquired, and prepared the agreement. All of this was done without public input. There's nothing left to finalize but a few contractual details. And we wouldn't know about it except for the other commissioner who's not here right now. So I would suggest that the Board of Commissioners really has this backwards. The first thing that we should do as a Board of Commissioners is get approval from the public, not just to preserve open space, but to acquire a specific parcel of land. And you should also put that in a referendum with a not to exceed price. And if that is agreed to by the electorate, then you can go and negotiate, right? And then finally you'd be able to finalize the transaction. So what I think you hear a lot of the people saying is we should start this again. Let's get the public input first on 12 million or some other number and buying a specific parcel, not just preserve open space. Then let's talk about getting the appraisals and doing a negotiation. Instead, what you have is you have a deal. You're going to present it in 2 hearings, apparently, and it'll be up to you whether you vote yes or no. And I don't think that the public will really have a vote. If you decide you're going to do it, anything we say will not be, it has the opportunity of not being considered. So I would appreciate if you consider revisiting this process and going back and getting approval to start. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rich.
Just one minute.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The appraisal, what will that be based on? Will that be based on the present zoning of the land as it exists today and not the density modification since it hasn't been
It will be
passed?
on the website, and you can read it in its entirety in a very short time.
You're doing negotiations now. Is it going to be appraised as 2-acre houses that can be built, since that's the existing zoning ordinance right now?
It will be on-
The appraisals, sir, appraisals are going to be based on what the current zoning is.
That'll be the 2-acre.
what the current zoning is, all the options, which would be 2-acre zoning or density modification, and on comps. I mean, the township has to have an MIA appraisal, so it's got to be certified. It's not going to be unusual. It's going to be the township's appraisal, which they engaged and they paid for. Nobody else paid for it. So,
Fine, that's what I understand,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to understand that they're taking negotiations on now, so you can't determine what the zoning is going to be in the future if you sign an agreement for the sale today, or 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks from now. Then you're not going to say it's based on the density modification. It's going to be based on farming country, two-acre lots.
it's going
I
to,
would understand.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? All right. I'd like to announce that we had an, oh, Jim? You almost missed your chance, Jim.
Jim Schneller, and I'm concerned about the fact that there is an apparent lack of transparency, and at what point the township is prepared, our township leaders are preparing to burden us with something, and it just seems like the spark for this didn't come from the people. I really stood up to say that there's a looming question in my mind why the conditional use hearing is happening before this is ironed out about some possible agreement of sale. Shouldn't a conditional use hearing happen after this is worked out? And if that's it, is there anyone else about Ardrossan? In fact, could I ask you for an answer on that? Could the conditional use hearing feasibly be postponed until this is resolved?
the applicant has the option of filing his conditional use application at any time. Township doesn't control that. Once he files it, starts that process, the township has to hold a hearing within 60 days, and then there has to be a decision rendered at the end of all the taking of the testimony within 45 days. So it's not something that the township can control. It's up to the applicant to, just like a zoning hearing board proceeding.
Right.
The MPC has specific time clocks that have to be met, and that's what happened in this case, Jim.
Does the board know if the testimony at the hearing is going to be limited to concrete matters, or could something nebulous like that be addressed?
It's not a zoning issue, Jim.
I'm sorry, the conditional use hearing.
That you can attempt to introduce whatever you want to introduce, and the hearing officer will make a ruling on it, depending on whether or not it's relevant. It's not up to the board to tell you what to present. You have a lot of familiarity with presenting things like that before boards and commissions, so it's your call. It's a quasi-judicial proceeding.
Well, I'm worried, I'm concerned if the first citizen who stands up, but that's totally unpredictable. I wanted to change the subject to the fact that I'm concerned about the Shimoni sidewalk, and especially about this property where people have quite a priceless tree that they are concerned about. It seems to me there was no credence given to their comment, and everyone left the room thinking, well, the bulldozers are going to come through and just tear away at the roots of this tree without any expert. So I wanted to ask that the board permit the arborist to participate, but more so, I wanted to ask the board that no windfall should come for any landowner who's going to conveniently have a tree that may be sick. There are 2 or 3 large oaks or maples there that are conceivable of a 20 grand or higher price to remove. 2 or 3 landowners stand possible of getting a convenient windfall from removal of a tree. And I wish the board would address that, because we shouldn't be taking trees down for people free of charge.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Jim.
Leslie Morgan, 12 Farm Road. I wasn't going to speak tonight because I'm actually a person in standing with the hearing officer, and our solicitor has been there as well. So I had a question that I have to direct to you, but I think he'll answer it. We are in what's called the very early stages of the land development plan for a residential piece of 311 acres. Additionally, across the street is another application that seems to not be getting as much notification, called the Wheeler Tract, for 27, I think, 0.65 acres. And they're both under density modification. We are under the conditional use part, asking if that land can use this condition for its design. After that, we get preliminary plan and final preliminary plan. what I was going to ask, either the board or John, if the law requires once an applicant files, and there's a clock basically on it, right? Is there a clock that made the negotiations start contemporaneously? Because it has been very hard for us to try and rally for the open space doctrine under density modification. And with your data points that you put out like 3 years ago, Jim, I've expanded on them, and I have a cheat sheet. And you would be wrong. Well, he did, and he did a great job, and I went to the website then and added on. But we have 17 density modification plans in this township. We've never paid for any of them, and not all of them were maxed out, okay? And it's right here, and you can make a copy if you would like. And in all purchases, we purchased entire tracts. Most of the stuff we purchased was never going to even be developed. We just purchased it opportunistically, potentially. Maybe it was what we call dead land. So it came below market. And in fact, in Lower Merion's open space doctrine, they specifically say, I think 3 to 6 times, we will not buy anything unless it's opportunistic or below market. I forget the exact words, so don't kill me. I encourage you all to look at their doctrine, not to say that we have to match that, but we would certainly not play market for what would be maybe pieces that couldn't be fully developed. And no, under the density modification and the history, I would share this with you, Jim, they did not max out the sites. And the average in Ward 3 of the 4 density modification sites is, according to your records and some of the records I pulled here, the percentage of common open space to the tract size that was allocated was 34%. The doctrine says 15% in the underlying, density, but they actually gave 34%, the average of these 4. You'd be glad to look at this. I don't mind sharing. If I'm wrong by a point or two, please don't kill me in the internet. Thank you.
Martin Heldring, 305 Audubon. I will be brief. Thank you, first of all, for your specific responses to some of the questions that were asked tonight. And I have one question. I think you've heard it tonight, and you've certainly read it on the patch. There's a lot of angst around how the public process will occur here, and particularly how you're going to get public comment. And I think that's because we're getting conflicting and confusing comments both here tonight and if you read it on the patch. So, for example, Mr. Spingler is running around saying he has 4 votes and it's over, in which case I'm wasting my time. We're all wasting our time. If that's the case, let's say it. Elaine, in your piece, you said it's ultimately the community's decision. I think that was a complete sentence. Mr. Nagel said, well, we have an election. Well, he's not up for re-election, and most of the facts, if not all the facts relating to this, come out after the election. So that, to me, seems a very ineffective tool for this. Unless he's going to assume that if both Mr. Booker and Mr. Curley win and Ms. Schaefer wins, then it's 2-3 and it's a dead deal. Which I don't think is the case. So my question is, there are many ways you can get public comment on this. This is one. There's how many people in Radnor, so you can't have all of them come here to speak. What is the board's position with regard to a referendum? It was posed on the patch. It got very quiet all of a sudden. I haven't heard it. There's been asked a couple times. There's been specific answers to specific questions. What is the board's position with regard to that? I can think of no better tool for such a substantive decision as this, with such long-range ramifications with the Radnor Township's financial condition, than going to the public with a full set of facts and asking for their opinion on the matter.
Could I just make one correction, Mr. Heldring? 2 years ago, there was an election in which myself, Jim Higgins, and Bill Spingler were all elected. Bill was reelected. Every one of those races, we ran on buying our Drossen. So to me, that's a pretty good input. And we live in a representative democracy, don't we?
Mr. Nagel, the facts are not out. We don't know what was said. If somebody came to me and knocked on my door and said, I've got all 4 votes, and by the way, it's going to be free, or somebody's donating the money, or whatever, I'd say, have at it. If you walked out and said it's $100 million, it's what are the facts? And it's clear, we all know, the facts are not out, and they will not be out before the election. So let's be honest. Let's be honest. This election is not a tool for that, nor was the one 2 years ago. What's the board's position on a referendum?
I mean, the board's position by inaction is not to support a referendum. If you recall, probably about 2 years ago, a motion was made for a referendum on this subject, and it was defeated 5-2. So by inaction, the board's position is not to support a referendum.
So is it then the board's position with regard to public comment that it will be those 2 town hall meetings and however many people can stand up and talk, whether they represent the majority of the people in Radnor or the minority or just a vocal minority or whatever? That's the way public comment will be solicited?
Well, we have hearings on our Drawson that we plan to have. We have hearings on our budget. And if our financial picture continues to improve in the last quarter, well, part of the last quarter, and if the facts on our Drawson continue to look favorable from the standpoint of the appraisal being a good appraisal, then it's certainly conceivable that we'll vote to do it. However, and this is a big however, I don't think there's a guarantee that there are 4 votes to do this.
So in that regard, Mr. Spengler's.
We're going to have debate, we're going to have comment, and I'm not going to vote for this if I am convinced that it's not in the best interest of the taxpayers of the Township of Radnor. So my mind is, I'm leaning towards it, and I'm one of the 4 votes, but my mind is not completely made up.
Well, so thank you for that clarification. And so I ask the board if, and I appreciate your clarification as well, but I ask that you be respectful of the public's time. If this is a done deal, don't waste our time. Thank you.
John, if it was to go to a referendum, when would we have to have that determined to make the May election?
The earliest would be next spring. So you'd have to do an ordinance, unit debt ordinance, similar to what was done in '06, I guess. Authorization to borrow X amount of money. I mean, it would be very much like what was done in '06.
But there's a reasonable amount of time, and given how this would likely play out, no actual closing would occur before that point in time.
No. Right.
Well, I'd just like to give my opinion on this.
Could you just say what just happened here for a second? You're saying that the speed at which it's going is
Yeah,
it won't be done?
You're killing me.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
But
You
what
guys
was
work
that?
for us, okay? So, I'm sorry, that's not the way this works, Elaine.
What was your
okay?
question?
My question is, Kevin, you just said, given the speed at which we are going, is it likely that we would close before? And then, John, you said we would
Spring.
close
Follow
before
the
the spring.
process, there's a whole set of steps in the open
There-
act
There's a
space.
difference
Which then
between-
again leads the group to think there's no support for a referendum. I would urge you then, why don't
So-
you take another vote tonight?
Okay, very good. That's a fair question. Hold on.
I think you could make a motion, can't
Martin
you?
asked that we
Okay.
not waste people's time. And if
Wait,
we know,
Mar-
that Martin Heldring, a few
Okay.
moments ago, he said, if the outcome is known,
Yeah.
don't waste people's time. The outcome of there's no reason to believe that the outcome of a referendum posed tonight would be any different than the outcome of that when it was put 2 years ago.
Wait, no, the referendum, for the bond.
Yes, 2 years ago, we had a discussion about whether this should go out to referendum. A motion was made by me, and Kevin supported it, and the board voted 5-2 not to go out to referendum.
Did we know we had almost 300 million of unfunded liabilities 2 years
Okay.
ago? No.
But the
I think
key-
there's a whole lot more facts, and I think you should do
Yes.
it.
So the key is, if this side of the board wants to go to referendum, then we go to referendum.
Right.
This side is still willing to do it. So it's not for Kevin or I.
Well, let's get it on the record. Take the vote, put it on the record.
We already are
Thank
on the
you
record.
so much for your comments. All right, is there any other public comment? Hi, Rob.
Hi, Elaine. Rob Murdoka, Wayne. I've been beaten up a couple times by a couple people on the board before, so I'll just ask 3 questions. What exactly has been the process to select the 3 appraisers, and who selected them, and how are they selected? Can you just explain to me as much as you're allowed to explain, because for the last 2.5 years, Every time I've asked about the appraisal process, I've been told it's a secret, it's an executive session, I can't discuss it. So what can you tell today?
Rob, we're going to discuss all of this when we have this deal ready to present.
The last
So
time
I don't want
Elaine,
to jeopardize the obligation that I
that's
have
one of
not
three questions.
to discuss
Would you
the
be able
details.
to answer that question? There are people here, the last time I was here and said anything was January 28th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm respectful of your time. I think that's about 9 months ago was the last time I came here and took anyone's time. What would your answer to my question be?
What is the question? Who hired the appraiser?
Provide me as much color, as much background about how these three appraisals were selected, what the process was to choose the three appraisers, what the scope was. I want to know as much as you could say about these three appraisers. That's my first question.
The township hired them.
Who selected them?
You know, I feel very uncomfortable. I have an obligation not to divulge the information that's in negotiation right now. I feel very uncomfortable. I've taken this obligation, and I take it seriously, and I do not want to go against that.
I'm taking my obligation as a concerned
And
citizen very
listen,
seriously.
Rob, I completely understand you. I completely understand how frustrated you are, and I know how passionate you are, and I so appreciate it. And I really cannot wait until you can have all of this information.
I will temporarily, for a few minutes, table the first question because you segued into my second question. Could you tell me exactly what is the negotiation voodoo? Like I think it was Rich Booker mentioning this. You have everything when you deliver the package to the public. Just about everything's going to be all wrapped up. What is so important is going on? What is being negotiated?
The terms of the agreement of sale, Rob. There's got to be, you're a real estate professional.
Yes, such as what? Like how much due diligence we're allowed, how much time we're allowed to perform due diligence?
You know what an agreement of sale is, right? I mean, so in that you have the acreage to be purchased, the price, settlement dates, contingencies, whether you want to do a phase 1 or phase 2 environmental study, all of that. There's no voodoo to it. But unless you have an agreement of sale, there's nothing that this board can act on. There's nothing that the board can act on unless there's a meeting of the minds, the seller wants to sell to the buyer at a price and subject to the terms.
You're right. I'm in real estate, and I've been a part of many negotiations, and this one seems very odd because to hide behind executive session or to say that I can't say X because it'll hurt negotiations, the disconnect that I don't understand is this has been the talk of the town for decades, at least 7 years since the funding mechanism has been passed.
Way before my time.
The developer who ultimately will stand to benefit from whatever money passes hands from the township in that direction knows how badly certain members of the board want the property. In answering any of these questions, what would be the detriment of answering these questions under this notion of it will hurt negotiations? We're bent over already from the developer's perspective. What would hurt?
That's your opinion. That's your opinion. The appraisals were hired by the appraiser was hired by the township.
Who are the three appraisers then? Let's start there. Can we just break it down? Who are they?
We're not going to discuss that tonight for all the reasons that you know why we can't discuss it. When there's an agreement of sale and there's a meeting of the minds and it's before this board, you will get to read all the appraisals. There was an appraisal that was done before I was sitting here. There's been 2 appraisals done in the last 3 years for this property.
Rob, if you could get your comments towards your input and your comment as opposed to the question and answer, that would be greatly appreciated.
I guess, okay, I have another question for each board member to answer. Just one question. What consideration have you given to the piece of information in the newspaper this past week that over the next decade, the study of approximately 500 people, 500 kids of enrollment decline in the township, school enrollment decline. Now, the reason I ask is we make a lot of fear-mongering about how much of the piece of land for Ardrossan will be developed. Will it be developed to maximum density or partial maximum density? What consideration have you given to the loss of 500 students in the school district inside our same township borders?
I'm going to ask you to keep your thoughts to comments and input as opposed to questioning right now.
Okay, I'll recap. Please do the right thing with appraisals.
Great. Thank you, Rob.
Please negotiate as if it's your own money, not other people's money. All of your own money, John, all. Pretend it's all coming out of your own wallet and negotiate that way, not where one infinitesimal fraction comes out of your wallet and the rest comes elsewhere. Third comment, the enrollment decline, please weigh that heavily inside the context of every time you decide that you might want to mention, oh my gosh, we're going to crowd our schools and we're going to have to build more because we're going to let a few extra houses on certain pieces of property in the township.
Thank you, Rob. Is there any other public comment? No.
My name is Václav Zábranský. I live on Newtown Road for 34 years.
Can you get a little closer to the microphone?
My name is Václav Zábranský. I live on Newtown Road for 34 years. As far as I'm concerned, during my tenure in this township, this is the most strategic decision which the township is facing. I came to this country from totalitarian system. You were all elected by electorate of the township. I understand you voted couple of years not to put this issue in front of the referendum for whatever reasons. I sit here, at least clearly in this room, I hear, and I know it from my neighbors, there is strong desire of this township that issue is put for referendum by electorate of this township. Even you have a legal right to pass it, whatever you choose to. I strongly urge you that you take this decision, face it with all your responsibility you have, and do whatever is necessary that people of this township have a right in public referendum say yes and no. As far as I'm concerned, many years ago now, there was one referendum on the trail. And you can all recall how long did it drag before it got to referendum or what was the result. There was very big political debate, yes or no, and it is one of the biggest benefits this township has. Please take your responsibility and do whatever it takes. Face it and make a right decision and give the people of this township, give you the vote, which way you should go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comment? No? Okay. Oh. Roberta?
Roberta Winters, I'm speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters, and in this regard, I would like to say it's imperative that the public understand the nature of the Sunshine Law. And while the League has been a longstanding advocate for transparency, there are provisions under the law for closed and/or executive sessions that include consideration of real estate matters. This is no doubt based on often volatile and sensitive nature of such proceedings. Changing this provision is not subject to the wishes of the public until it is embraced by the majority of our elected officials in Harrisburg. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on now.
It's a comment, not a question.
Rob, can you hold it till the end of the meeting since you've already been up? Do you mind?
We're going to go to the rest of the agenda, okay? You can comment later on. You can comment later on.
If I heard Roberta correctly about the Right to Know Act, there's a necessary but not sufficient hurdle. You can disclose all you want. You don't have to hide behind the real estate exception you could give everybody the information on the right to know. You're choosing to use the right to know real estate exception.
Thank you, Rob. Any other public comment? Okay,
I have a comment.
sure.
I'm Lisa Fury. I live at 439 Inverary Road. I had a real estate license. I have a law license. I work with developers, and I'm an interior designer. Is there a way, and this is probably a question also, is there a way to have another referendum? It was turned down once. Why can't we try to have another one? 2 years ago, you said none. Is there any reason why we can't try to have it again?
No, it would be possible.
So is there any reason why we're not doing that,
There's
since
not-
everybody seems to want one?
Right.
There's not sufficient support. There aren't 4 votes to make that happen.
The public has the right under the Home Rule Charter to get signatures, enough signatures to do a referendum, to have it on the ballot. This board also has a right, if they have enough votes, to put a referendum question on the ballot. So the possibility exists.
Because it seems like it was so long ago.
And, yeah, so I'm not going to debate that. It was a long time ago. But, so the public has a right to do that. And you can petition your commissioners to do that, to act. We have to create an ordinance. That ordinance would have to get introduced. We would have a hearing. We would then have an approval. And then it has to go to the Board of Elections. So there's 2 methods. This is one method. The other method is the public has a right to do it on their own.
And that method seems like the timeline's not going to work out, because by the time all that goes, a decision will already have been made. And perhaps by the time everything gets online in 2 weeks, all the critical documents, a decision will have already been made. So it's great they're going to be online, but what's going to happen in the meantime, in the next 2 weeks, before anybody's had a chance to see any of the
Yeah,
documents? I'm just curious.
I'll just put it out there that I've been on the board
It's-
almost 7 years now, and the public has been fully aware that this was a possibility. The referendum happened 8 years ago, whenever that was. So it's been out there. Now, did we think it was going to happen? I'm surprised. I've been on this board for 7 years, and I still didn't think it was going to happen during my tenure on the board. So I guess the point I'm making here is the public had they had opportunity over the last 7 years to get the petition and to get this on a ballot, and it never happened. I'm not saying they didn't want it. I'm just saying it didn't happen. So this board then has their choice, and I think the board has.
Yeah, but the problem is, Mr. Fisher, that this board works for us.
No, I understand.
That's the only
Yeah.
problem I'm having with it.
Yeah, well, and I think the board, each board member will have to keep an open mind about this, and they will get a chance to deliberate. We will be deliberating. This is, as much as we keep saying it's a done deal, I'm not deciding.
I'm actually have had enough of that whole, I don't even want to hear that again.
But I'll just put it, I'm not decided, so.
Because, this might be Bill Spingler's lifelong mission, but it's not the mission of everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, we are going to move on now. I'd like to announce that we had an executive session preceding this Board of Commissioners meeting on October 28th, 2013, at which we discussed real estate, litigation, and personnel matters. Next, can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of August 26th?
I'll move to approve the minutes of the public meeting, August 26, 2013.
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes 6-0. Next, we have the consent agenda. Is there any item that a commissioner would like to remove?
I'd like to remove item B, please.
Okay. Is there any item that any member of the other 2 that any member of the public would like to remove? Yes, we have Barron requesting that A is removed. Is that right? A? Okay, well, so much for our consent agenda. Then, would somebody like to go?
Wait, can we just pull out C then while we're at it?
So let's go ahead and vote on the consent agenda. Somebody make a motion?
I move we approve item C of the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes 6 to
And
nothing.
those from Garrett Hill, thank you for coming out tonight.
And let's go ahead and take those 2 other items. A was the approval of staff traffic meeting minutes, September 18th, 2013, and October 16th, 2013. Perhaps, Baron, you'd like to come up and give
And
comment about that?
While he's en route, it should say acceptance, not approval.
You're right. We accept them, not
Yeah.
approve them.
Also, I'd
Thank
like to
you.
make a comment. We have heard back from PennDOT about making the intersections on Darby Paoli Road all-way stops. They have rejected this. I guess we need someone to volunteer to go out there and be killed in an accident, because that's the only way SEPTA apparently will respond.
PennDOT.
PennDOT, not SEPTA, yes. However, I plan to talk to our state reps and our state senator about this and see what we can do. We all know that part of the reason we have the traffic problems over there, not just the safety issue, but the traffic problems, is because of those stop signs, the way they're arranged.
Okay, Baron?
Thank you. Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. My comment is not necessarily about the approval of the minutes, because obviously they are what they are, but I thought this was appropriate to ask a quick question about the content of one of them. The October 16th minutes, the second of the 2, the very first item under new business regarding consideration of making Roberts Road between Sproul and Darby Paoli one-way street. Part of the minutes for that says, at this time it appears the speed humps are working based upon the 7-day traffic count. An additional speed hump will be placed in the area of 700 Roberts Road. I thought that speed humps and all the traffic calming had to be approved by this board.
They were already, there were traffic humps approved on that street already.
But
They
even-
haven't been installed yet. They're temporary ones right
But
now.
even an additional one, so the approval was given for blanket for all of them, and if they needed it, they could do additional ones? I'm confused on
I'm
this.
assuming that that's the case.
Yeah, originally it was for 2, but they did have the option for the 3rd, as long as the street was wide enough. And after meeting with Public Works, that is the goal, is to add the 3rd.
Okay, as long as I wasn't remembering if all that were approved, and I just wanted
Okay.
to double check. Thank you.
All right, so can I have a motion for the acceptance of these
I
minutes?
move that we accept the staff traffic meeting minutes from September 18th and October 16th.
Second?
Any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 6 to 0. Next, we have a motion for the authorization to receive bids to replace all existing parking meters throughout Radnor Township with kiosks that would accept credit cards, coin, bill, and cellular payments.
So, Bill, I had a little bit of a conversation with you. I recognize that this is just a motion to authorize to receive bids, but, you know, I did some quick math on this, and I need to see a financial analysis for when this comes for approval. Based on my numbers here, we're talking about administrative costs of about $50,000 a year, $72 a year for each of the 677 meters. There's an additional 10 cents per transaction. So I don't know what that amounts to. I see, you know, $450,000 for meters. Our total revenue generated by the parking meters now is a little bit less than $400,000, if I recall, looking at it correctly. So, you know, we're not committing ourselves, but at the end of it all, I need the pieces to be laid out to say, is this a wise decision to basically give somebody north of $50,000 to administrate this program for us?
Sure, and we've already started to put that information together. The reason why it's not included in what you see tonight is it's based on estimates. We'd rather come back to the board once we have actual bid prices so we can give you more precise numbers on that front. And I think what the police department was trying to do under the fiscal impact is just emphasize the cost of not moving forward with the kiosk program and how it's going to impact our capital plan moving forward and replacing the current meters. So, which is not an insignificant amount of money either.
I recognize they're police officers, not financial people. That's why I'm talking to you.
Well, I'd like to know, Chief Colarola, the movement of the legislation, your paragraph at the end of the memorandum is talking about efficiency and productivity of our officers and enhancing customer satisfaction. What if we just stayed with the current system of the old meters and didn't go in this direction? Are we then creating a problem for people that park in Wayne because we have kiosks and they won't be able to use them? What really is the impetus for this? Is a huge expenditure of money. Kevin said I have it $460,360. That's a lot of money.
Commissioner, you're right. Initially, it is a huge expenditure, but we have to realize that the meters we use now are antiquated. Most cities and other townships are going to the kiosk system. As a matter of convenience for the public, you can't beat the kiosks. I can't tell you how many times we get complaints from people that get a ticket because they frantically look for change and they didn't have it. The kiosks, between using credit cards, coin, and bills, makes it so much more convenient, not only for the people that are using it, but also as far as collections. We had a meeting this morning with the finance director regarding our collection procedure. It's a way of the future. The meter heads, they become old, the batteries go dead. There's just a lot of upkeep, and I think eventually you're going to see them just become obsolete.
I calculated in your memorandum, or Lieutenant Flanagan's, that the maintenance, if we stayed with what we have now, the maintenance totals around $13,400. And that's for a new coin canister, certifying all the existing meters so that we don't charge people or ticket people when they shouldn't be. Then there's something called a new Duncan super meter, and then new batteries. So that's $13,400 versus $460,360. And what I'm hearing, the justification for that is convenience.
If I could just interject briefly, part of what we've just looked at internally and coming to you tonight is there is a return on the initial capital investment. There is a return period that we would like to put in front of the board when the decision's in front of you to actually move forward with the kiosk or not. The problem we ran into is we didn't want to come out tonight with estimates based on one provider's numbers. So what we're asking for tonight is just simply to go out to bid, have those bids come in, and then rerun those calculations with the actual numbers, and then at that point come back to the board with a full presentation of the financial aspect as well as the internal controls associated with the improvements on the kiosk system and the parking, or the convenience to the actual users of the parking spaces. So for tonight's purposes, it's just authorization to solicit the bids. On the back end, once those bids are received, hopefully we'll have a presentation that will answer a lot of these questions. And at that point, it's go, no go. So.
And am I correct that this is a phased installation, 3 years? The first year would be $153,000, the second year $153,000, and the third year $154,360?
Yeah, those phase numbers there assume if we didn't move forward with the kiosk system, the expenses we'd be incurring to replace our current meter heads that are aged and starting to fail, as I understand it.
No. No, the numbers I just read off is the new program. 153, 153, 154, 360.
Yeah, those numbers are breaking down the annual replacement costs of the meters that we have today. So if we were not to move forward with the kiosk system, we would anticipate incurring those kind of replacement costs for the meter heads as they exist today.
Oh,
That's
so
not
I
the way it's
misunderstood
written.
that as well. So those numbers in the memo to us was, those represent what's in our capital budget for replacement of the old ones?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's not the way it's written. It's
No.
Right,
confusing.
no, that's
Do you
confusing.
agree with that, Lieutenant?
We were trying to demonstrate the reason to go out to bid. As
I
Mr.
see.
White articulated, we need to get all the numbers together to make sure we can display an accurate picture of the final product. But we wanted the commissioners to be aware that we just don't want to go buy a new tool. There is a specific financial picture if we remain with the current coin-operated meter heads. We will have to take, in my
Right.
opinion, action. So we're just trying to demonstrate a possible fiscal plan of the 3-year replacement of our entire meter
Okay.
system.
Should we number for
But what are we voting on then? I know we're just authorizing to go out with an RFP, but what's the financial impact of
We don't know.
ultimately?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is we don't know what the exact financial impact is at this point with the kiosk system because we don't have those bids yet. So that's why we're asking the board tonight to allow us to go out and receive those bids.
It's written in a confusing manner because you linked the operational fee of the kiosks and the monthly management of the kiosks with the replacement of the existing meters. Because I didn't interpret it that way, but now that what you're telling me is I might be saving $450,000.
Well, instead
versus-
of, well, it'd just be
relative
buying,
to-
yeah, spending that money on a different program.
Right.
Yeah, I apologize for any of the confusion, but just to be clear, what we're asking for tonight is simply the authorization to go out to bid for the kiosks.
And then you'll get the kiosk number and compare it against the 450 to say, this is what it'll cost us to install a kiosk. If we don't go install kiosks, it'll cost us $450,000 over the next 3 years to replace our existing meters.
That is correct, and we'll come back to the board at that point, like we do with all of our bids, and the board will have the decision at that point to proceed with purchasing the kiosks or not.
I think we need to approach this also. First question I have is Lower Merion gives you 10 minutes free. If you pull up and the meter says 0, you push a button, you get 10 minutes free. We, I think, should look at implementing that similar package, and that's a separate discussion, not for tonight.
But, so I think you're right, and I think we got to make that decided tonight, so that's part of the spec.
The reason I
right?
bring it up is I want to make sure that if we go to a kiosk system,
Yeah.
it can function that way. The other thing is, I think we need to approach this too as a convenience to the taxpayer, a taxpayer service, not just the pure financial piece. So many times I've been walking up North Wayne Avenue and people asking for change. Do you have change? You know, and you break a buck for them so they can put it in the meter, otherwise they get a ticket. And we don't want to be ticketing people for something like that. So, you know, it's also not just the financial piece, it's the, you know, the service to the community piece.
Okay, we need a motion to get this.
I got one other comment, though, another technical aspect. Similarly, I think we got to look at that Norristown option that has the pay-by-web. So between the pay-by-web and the 15-minute free are the two key technical elements for me.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I motion that we authorize staff to receive bids to replace existing parking meters throughout Radnor Township with kiosks.
Second.
Any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment?
Yes, Madam President. All this is authorizing bids. This is not making a decision. The township's not making a policy. This allows us to go out and get factual information to present to the board and to the public. That's all this is.
Any other staff comment, public comment? Although, go ahead.
Just quickly, Rich Booker, Belrose Lane. I go to work, I've been going to work in Philadelphia since 1997. I drive most of the time. I have parked at the parking meters in Philadelphia hundreds of times, 100 or more times. Very experienced with the kiosks in Philadelphia. And I'm making the comment that I don't recommend that we take this on. First of all, it's going to take years to make up the cost, the capital cost. Kevin alluded to it, $50,000 a year. 10 cents a transaction is going to be based on your credit card or other whatever transactions that you have. So there's a lot of costs that are built into this. Second, it's going to be difficult. There's a lot of older folks. There's people in the suburbs here that aren't used to this, and it's not that easy to use the kiosk. The money, the dollars doesn't always work very well. It works best with the credit card. That's where it works. It doesn't work well with change often, and it doesn't work well with the cash. And I don't think it's something we need in Radnor. These kiosks really work well when you have high dollar. So if you have $5 per park, like in Philadelphia, you're using credit cards, that's what these are for. That's what they work well for. Just the quarters here and there, they really don't make sense. The main issue here is I don't think that we want to copy Philadelphia in this regard, or Lower Merion either, for that matter. You know, I go to Philadelphia every day, and I don't think it should be a role model for what we do in Radnor. We don't need to charge anyone, and we don't need to charge anyone for parking if we don't want to, okay? We've made a choice to do that. But this is not about revenue generation, I don't think. It's not a convenience. It's more convenient not to pay. So let's not pay. But Radnor, as Radnor residents, we don't live in Philadelphia. I work in Philadelphia every day, and I'm glad to come home to Radnor because it's different. Let's keep it that way. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Just a short comment. I agree with Mr. Nagel about the 10 minutes. I think that's very important. The other, as far as Philadelphia, I am apprehensive about using the kiosk, and I'm always thinking I'm going to get robbed as far as the kiosk. But I think it would be hard on older people out here not familiar with it. But I agree with Mr. Nagel on the 10 minutes.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm looking here, and it says only 74 of the meters were purchased later than 1995. That's telling me that there's more than 600 meters that are still working. You know, I think everyone has the experience that things that were made longer ago work better and last longer. And, you know, while I think it is important to move into the 21st century in many ways, you know, this is something I think we can just be thoughtful about and, you know, really take our time and look at the costs and benefits, because I think that there are some nuances here. And, you know, just says to me, it seems to me, even if we're not spending this $450,000 on kiosks, that we're still going to be spending 40% of the cost of parking for a half an hour on a transaction fee. You know, if it says 10 cents for each credit card transaction, well, if I'm using my credit card to pay for 25 minutes of parking, that doesn't seem like a very cost-effective system at all. So I think, you know, getting a bid, getting all the information is always a good thing, but, you know, let's make sure we have a complete picture, and it doesn't seem like there's much of a rush. Every time I go to Park and Wait, the meters are working just fine.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this? All right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Next, we move on to the department monthly reports. Can we have a motion to accept those?
Move to accept the department monthly reports. I'll second that.
And I will just give some brief comments, as I try to do each month. It's important to realize what the township government does for all of us. While we collect one of the smallest tax pieces of all the taxes we pay in this township, this township performs most of the quality of life services that you enjoy. I'll just give you some examples. I try to do a little bit each month, and if I skip a department, I apologize in advance. For instance, in the month of September, the police department responded to 1,630 complaints. The community development department processed 1,694 permits year to date. That's year to date. That's an incredible number. Recognize that those permits are not something that take a few minutes to process. They can, in fact, involve many, many trips to the field to inspect. In the Public Works Department, we have 3 men that maintain 149 pieces of equipment. That's every day of the week, every month of the year, throughout the year. You know, the snow plows, when they hit a bump, they may crack a plow, they may weld the plow, and there's just an enormous amount of equipment that they take care of and make sure that it functions. We have 11 men that are on the Highways Department, and just a few examples, they installed 54 new stop signs last month. So, you know, when everyone's saying, I'm tired of the speeders in my neighborhood, let's get some signs up, they don't just grow out of the ground. You don't water that and they come up. We actually have staff that take care of all that. So I just want to thank all staff, not just the ones that I mentioned tonight, but I'll make sure the next 2 meetings or 3 meetings I'll continue to do this, that I've said this before, we continue to do more and more with less and less, okay? You got to read into that, because if you go back about 8 years ago, we had about 30% more staff than we do today. Yet, we do more than we did then. So keep that in mind. I don't receive many complaints from the public about services. There may be frustrations out there at times. Keep in mind that the people that do this work for us, they like working here. They like helping us. They like their jobs, and they like making Radnor a great place. So be patient. If you have a complaint, make sure that the complaint gets to the right person. I can assure you, and this has been my witness, that all the complaints that I've had in the last 7 years have been addressed professionally and quickly. and to the satisfaction of my electorate. So thank you to staff, thank you, Bob, and to all of you and those that aren't here tonight for the hard work that you do in the service of the community.
Is there any other commissioner comment about the departmental reports? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes 5-0 with Commissioner Nagel not present. Next, the committee reports. Public safety is Bill Spingler's Ballywick. He is out of town on some emergency childcare in New Jersey for a granddaughter, so I will take it for him. In front of us, we have Ordinance 2013-17. This is just the introduction of this ordinance. It is an ordinance amending the Code of the Township of Radnor, Chapter 270, Vehicles and Traffic, revising Sections 270-16, Stop Intersections, 270-28, Parking Prohibited at All Times, 270-29, Parking Prohibited Certain Hours, 270-31, Special Purpose Parking Zones, and 270-57, Parking Meter Zones Established. And Superintendent Colarulo, I think you could probably give us a little background on this.
Sure, Madam President. This ordinance combines several changes that have been recommended by the Staff Traffic Committee and which you just read into record. For instance, the installation of a stop sign at Old Oaks Road and Buckingham Drive will benefit traffic calming. The one-sided street parking is requested by Bryn Mawr's Fire Company Chief to allow safer maneuverability of fire apparatus to the more narrow streets of Garrett Hill. In fact, Lieutenant Flanagan has pictures if the board needs to see them. This will also permit more ease in placing the ladder truck, as its outriggers need to extend well beyond the width of the truck to stabilize it during ladder operations. This will also benefit the township trash trucks at snow plows each day in the event that it does snow. Parking is being prohibited on the bridge on Radnor Street Road in the area of the storm grates. This is something Commissioner Jim Higgins pushed for, and it's a worthy cause. And this is to permit easy access and removing blocking debris during the rainstorms that we saw what happened with the hurricanes. A sign will be posted at the gates. Parking is being prohibited on Brookside Circle on the south side after requests from the neighbors were received. Radnor Middle School teachers permit parking on Runnymede Avenue is being moved to Luella Avenue. This will be more efficient for the teachers and create a better traffic flow on Runnymede. And finally, there are two 15-minute meter parking meters, in North Wayne, and they're proposed to be moved for the benefit of the customers to the retail shops. This is requested by the dry cleaners on the west side of North Wayne Avenue. And they're the basic changes up for vote.
Okay, do we have some commissioner comments on this?
Yes, Chief. On Radnor Street Road, I understand everything except I don't understand what it means when it says for a distance of 4 feet. Does that mean it's extending the current no parking for an additional 4 feet?
As far as the specifics, if you don't mind, Commissioner, I do have Lieutenant Flanagan who runs the traffic safety unit. I want to have them elaborate on that.
Yeah, that was to extend out with paint and allow us to cite should somebody park in particular. And I honestly don't know the measurement, but I believe the 4 feet covers the rough size of the drain itself to make sure that the Public Works could access that, as the one resident had complained that if a wheel was on there, it was hard to remove debris. So that measurement takes care of that dimension of that inlet.
Okay, thanks.
Is Bryn Mawr Fire Company buying wider fire trucks or something? I mean, what's the impetus? I happen to have lived on one of the roads that are being changed here to parking on.
We do
one
have
side.
pictures here, and
Yeah,
it
but
was,
it's not-
it was an
yeah, but-
ongoing problem because there's supposed to be parking on one side of the street, but Chris, I'll let you.
Are their trucks bigger than they used to be?
Absolutely. They are now 101 inches long from the manufacturer.
How
So
about the width?
I'm sorry?
How about the width?
It is 101 inches long, or I'm sorry, wide.
So they're
and the
buying
vehicles are absolutely bigger than in the past.
And Lieutenant Flanagan, first of all, I want to thank you and Chief Kincaid for bringing this to my attention as well. I was able to do a ride-along with Bryn Mawr Fire Department and Lieutenant Flanagan several months ago. After this went through staff traffic, we got out there, and I got to see this firsthand. It was actually quite surprising to see how little room there was when Bryn Mawr's ladder was trying to traverse through the neighborhoods. As you'll notice, this ordinance has quite a number of streets what we call Conestoga Village and Old Oaks. And the good news is I did share this with my constituents, both by email and also out door to door. And I was actually very surprised that I've gotten thumbs up from virtually everyone. Everyone is saying, what took you so long? This is something we actually want. I did unofficially survey a lot of the streets, and what we found was that while there are large numbers of cars parking in the streets at different times, for the most part, the residents park in their driveways. So I don't believe there's going to be much hardship. There may be some hardship. We have to be real about this. I think, unfortunately, we're not going to realize that until we get further along in the process. So at this time, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from all the residents. I paid particular attention to Barclayton because that seemed to be the highest dense parked street in the area, and those residents seemed to support it. So I haven't had any specific person saying, I don't want this. I've had them question it, and there's some concern, but I think moving forward, maybe we have to realize that there may be some adjustments necessary, but I think it's a go. So I feel confident that the residents will respond to this, and they do want to feel safe. They want to know that if there's a fire call or an ambulance, that response can get to their house without being slowed down, and in worst case, prohibited from getting there. So I fully support this. Thank you again to Chief Kincaid from Bryn Mawr Fire Department and Lieutenant Flanagan for taking time at night, probably when you're not on duty, to make sure that this was done and treated with the respect it needed and the due diligence. So thank you again.
Okay. I don't believe we moved and seconded this, so would somebody like to move it?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Who moved it? I don't think it was moved.
I thought,
I'll move the introduction, or the
Okay.
passage.
Okay.
then I'll second that.
All right. Is there any other commissioner comment on this or questions? Any staff? And how about the public?
Good evening. Jim Cornelio, 135 Barclayton Road, Garrett Hill, Pennsylvania, Ward 7. Have lived there with my family since 1987. John, this may come as a shock, but I'm opposed to this proposed ordinance. But
I did drop a
I respect your service.
I dropped a map at your house though, right?
I know I wasn't home.
Okay. Thanks for calling me before tonight.
Obviously, there's always advantages and disadvantages of any law being passed, and with this one, I think there's two big negatives that the board should consider. The first one, obviously, is you're reducing the street parking in what's called Conestoga Village, which, John, you should know how many different homes are there. There's probably over 100.
There's about 85, 90.
Okay, close to 100. So you're reducing the parking, you're cutting the street parking in half, and that's going to impact everybody. If you have 2 or 3 or more cars, if you have guests over, if you have parties, then you're going to have to park farther away. But that's a matter of convenience, but it's going to create inconvenience to all the residents, but it's not really a safety issue. The other big negative, I think, is a safety issue, and that is when you have parking on both sides, it really acts as traffic calming. And, maybe the police department or use your own common sense that people are going to drive slower when there's parking on both sides. Now, if you take that away, some of our motorists are going to have a tendency to speed up. Now, one thing about Conestoga Village is that we have hundreds of children. They are all over the place. And I remember a number of years ago we had a serious accident on the Barron. So if you take away the traffic calming of traffic on parking on both sides, you might have some accidents with these younger children. So that's a safety issue. That's a negative. Now, I understand the impetus was the Bryn Mawr Fire Company saying they'd like to have they complained about how narrow the street is. Now, Conestoga Village, like every other community, we have trucks come into our community every day. Federal Express trucks, UPS trucks, delivery trucks, moving vans, grass mowing trucks, they all get by. The trash trucks, which are the townships, I'm not aware of any incidents that they've not been able to get by. The fire company, in my neighborhood, I see the trucks coming by twice a year, June, to collect money for the 4th of July, and I've never seen them. I mean, they have to slow down. They can't go through quickly, but they get by. I don't know whether, John, when you went out with Chris, whether or not you actually had to go backwards.
Well, the biggest issue was getting down certain streets when it was parked on those streets on both sides.
Will you prevent it from getting down any particular street?
I would say yes. I mean, so proper response of the fire department is not one truck, it's 3. So if you cannot get all 3 of those vehicles in front of the house because of cars parked, then there's not a proper response. So what we found was that the ladder truck in particular has these outriggers that kind of come out to stabilize the vehicle when they put the ladder up. A lot of people don't realize how far out they actually go. And the problem is in the cartways in that neighborhood is that if it's parked on both sides, that ladder will not be able to deploy. That ladder will not be able to raise up and do its work. So that's one issue. The second issue we had was the ladder was actually unable to turn around on Barclayton Circle. So we go down the circle, we have to back out, and it's a curved road with cars parked on both sides. It took about 20 minutes to get that ladder out of that street. That's not normal. That's not what you want.
That's Barclayton Circle.
Well, the road, Barclayton Circle, yes, but I'm not saying the circle. I'm saying that whole leg of Barclayton Circle. So all the way back to Barclayton, so back to the corner. It was double parked on both sides. So it's a real issue, and I understand what you're saying. I just want to mention, though, the map I did distribute actually had an error, and the parking would be on your side of the street, not the other side. So
Okay.
I just want to clarify
Well, I'm
that.
not, it's going to impact the whole
Well, I
neighborhood.
thought it's important that you're here, and I can at
Yeah,
least say
I understand what you're saying. I've been there since 1987, and I think the last time we had a Bryn Mawr Fire Company on an emergency call, I don't know whether there's records of this, but it was about 10 years ago. A gentleman by the name of Bill Driscoll's house got hit by lightning, and the Bryn Mawr Fire Company responded. So, the Bryn Mawr Fire Company responded and quickly put out the fire. So I don't know. Now, 101 inches is 8.5 feet. And I don't think the width is the real problem here. I mean, your typical FedEx or UPS truck is the same size. So it sounds to me like
But the ladder is 4 times longer than a UPS
So you're talking
truck, so-
about not about the width being a problem. It's more about parking 3 vehicles in front of the house that's burning.
It's not just turning radiuses. Again, the ladders need to be able to deploy the stabilizers, and if they can't do that, so the fire you spoke of, they probably did not erect the ladder. But if that house burned, if that roof caught fire, they would need to have that ladder up, and that would prevent. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can lose a neighborhood. If a house fully burns, the radiated heat is enough to set the adjacent homes on fire. So, again, the fire departments are concerned. It isn't just Bryn Mawr, it's Radnor also responds to that neighborhood as a second.
But their concern is not based upon an actual incident where they couldn't put out a fire.
No,
it's a matter of.
No, it's based on trying to drive through the neighborhoods. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And again,
This, I want to remind everyone, we're introducing this
Yeah, it's
tonight.
introduced.
Sure.
We'll have the
So
hearing.
we're not passing anything tonight.
So I will
and
be
we can have some
emailing this
time
out.
for offline conversation
Yeah, and I
about
plan to
this.
email this out, and I actually plan to go door to door again.
Okay.
To make sure, because again, I did miss you that day. I did leave you a map. But I really have gotten, you are actually the first strong counter argument, but I appreciate it because we want to get it right. We want to
Yeah.
make sure that we do the right
When
thing.
I came home tonight, a couple of residents called me over and they said, "Oh, you're going to the township meeting tonight," and I didn't know about this, and they were both concerned. They were both opposed to it, but they weren't going to the meeting tonight. I thought there would be, since Conestoga Village is over, almost 100 homes, I thought there would be a lot of people here since they're cutting the traffic or the parking
Well,
in half.
there may be for the hearing, so.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I think before you pass an ordinance, you always look for less restrictive ways of dealing with the problem. And for instance, in the turning around on corners, I mean, if the police department enforced, how close you can park to a hydrant, how close you can park to an intersection, things of that nature, that might alleviate the problem somewhat. So I think that should be considered. So I just wanted to, I respect your service for all of you and hope you take that in consideration.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, Jim Riley, 9 Meadowood Road. I used to live on DeBaron and Fairfax in Conestoga Village. The road you talked about, Barclayton Circle, you can remove cars on both sides. The truck's still going to have to back up out of there. Even if you did it to one side, it can't turn around there. It's going to have to back up. Just that one is not the best example.
Okay.
They're going to have to back up
Yeah.
anyway. With no
Actually, the
cars.
ladder can turn around in the circle. It takes 3 turns. But when the cars are parked in the circle, it cannot.
Right.
It cannot park. It cannot turn around at all.
It's
And
hard-
the hard part is backing out.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for a car to do it with the cars.
Thanks, Jim. Any other public comment? All right. It's been moved and seconded. Can I have a vote? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It is introduced by a vote of 6-0. Next, we have Personnel and Administration, and that is with John Fisher.
Okay, we have Resolution 2013-130. This is amending the Township Manager's employment contract. And we have that in our packet somewhere here. So I'll just go over the details here very quickly. In essence, the manager is asking that we consider removing him from the pension because his participation in the pension adds quite a bit of liability to the township's MMO and our pension calculations, minimal contribution, and also the MMO. So we've come to terms with the manager on this. We will provide him a one-time payment of $7,500 on January 16, 2014. And the caveat is that if the manager were to leave before his vesting, he would repay that money. So we've removed the risk. But the goal here is to bring, first of all, to bring down our obligations. And the manager has agreed to take a stand here and do what he can personally to do that. And with that said, I'll move to introduce this resolution. Sorry, to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I would just like to say I find this is a very meaningful gesture from our township manager, setting a great example. We had the CARFAC give us some very sage advice about how we can start to get a handle on our long-term liabilities. And planning to fund for them is one way, which we've done, and we've committed to a funding plan. But really, the crux of the matter, as discovered by CARFAC, is that many of our benefits are above market. And that is something over time that we really need to address if we're ever going to get real fundamental change in the way we can sustainably continue to give benefits to our employees. So again, I find this a very meaningful gesture in setting an example of maybe another way to approach our benefits, our long-term, moving forward pension benefits and healthcare benefits. Any other commissioner
Well,
comment?
Bob, this will help. We have other things we've got to do, and but you doing this is a great gesture. It's appreciated.
I think we all appreciate it.
Any other commissioner comment or staff comment? Any public comment?
Like the board here, I'd like to comment that I believe it is very commendable for Mr. Zinkowski to volunteer to be excluded from the Radnor Pension Program. For the last 50 years or so, politicians have been overpromising on pensions and benefits with respect to its public employees to the point where we have this $250 million in unfunded post-employment benefit obligations. It's obvious those are unsustainable, and we can't continue to provide for the same level of benefits for township employees. We must negotiate changes to benefit packages that will help reduce this unfunded liability on a prospective basis. However, we'll need to ask all of our township employees to make more of a contribution towards their retirement and pension benefits. And Bob epitomizes this sentiment and is choosing to lead by example. My bet is that in doing this, he'll be controlling what he invests and the instruments he used to invest in his pension money, and that ultimately he's going to achieve greater financial security than he would otherwise. So to the extent, I guess there's a question. I would recommend the township set up applicable 403B. Is there already a 403B in place, or is that newly established for Bob?
Yeah, the township already has an existing 457 plan.
457?
Yeah,
All right. And then we're establishing a new 403B for this one employee, or?
No.
No, so it's going to be, it's extension to the 457
Yeah.
is what we'll use. Well, I'd like to like to recommend that we provide for these types of plans and for all employees that would volunteer to migrate to a self-directed defined contribution retirement plan. In the long run, I'm confident it'll be good for the employees and the township. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Any other public comment? I'll call the vote. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Passes 6-0. Now we will move on to the finance and audit with Kevin Higgins.
First item on the agenda is the disbursement review and approval of items 2013-10B and 2013-10C in the amount of $3,603,536.66, and these are all within the approved budget, approved by the various departments, and consistent with our purchase order process. Anything more to add, Bill?
No.
Okay, make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I would just like to comment that this month, all of the escrow paid fees and anything that was reimbursed was highlighted. So helpful. Really nice to see that. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that's a trend that we're starting. It's really helpful to see what, and the totals on the bottom of each page.
Yes,
Right
that
on.
was a recommendation from a fellow commissioner, so.
Well, it's really helpful in going through those numbers. So thank you for doing it. Is there any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 6-0.
And next item on the agenda is Resolution 2013-129 pertaining to the allocation of the business privilege tax settlement that we received earlier this year for $8 million. So the $8 million is being allocated, $2.7 million to the pension fund, $2.6 million to the capital fund, of which $1.1 million is going over to the Willows, $1.2 million to the storm water fund, and then there's two operational efficiency programs, the parking kiosk program and the enterprise resource program. The parking kiosk program is $450,000, and the enterprise resource software program is $1 million. So, Bill, is that $450,000 pertaining to the parking kiosk matter we discussed earlier?
It would be allocated towards that project. But again, it's similar to any other purchase of, well, that exceeds the charter amount of $7,500. Specific purchases of these dollars would have to come back in front of the board for review and approval. So at this point, it's an allocation within the fund.
Great. This is just accounting. Right. So I'm not opposed to allocating, and I'm opposed to the $1 million going over to the Willows like I was before, so I'm not going to introduce or make a resolution to pass
I'll
this.
move to adopt Resolution 2013-129.
Second.
Can we have an explanation of the Willows? Because I have the same concern.
I think as part of this, as you're aware, the bridge is collapsing over at the Willows. That needs to be repaired. Right now, it is closed, which I know there is some foot traffic allowed. That's going to have to be stopped because the bridge is collapsing even further on the property. Also includes the water line replacement, as well as resurfacing of some of the roads within there in the parking areas. So that makes up what that area is, all the public area.
Okay.
That's going to have to be taken care of.
So these are expenditures that are independent of, if we choose not to proceed with the Willows project as the board decided to proceed, these are items that you believe should be done for the park, not for the building.
That's correct.
And how much of it is pertaining to that bridge, Bob?
As of right now, I know with just the engineering and design, we're probably looking at almost $250,000. And then the bridge, because of the water flow that goes underneath there, is going to have to be arched. My guess is that's probably going to end up a couple $100,000, so we may be at $400,000 just on that bridge.
So the bridge is the bulk of it?
The bridge is going to be a big part of that, and then the water line replacement as well, which is in bad shape.
Okay. Well, you convinced me otherwise.
Are there any other commissioners to comment?
I will just make a brief comment. I'm happy to support this allocation. I mentioned before that this $8 million settlement is making up for non-compliance over a long period of time, and that money, if it had been collected over a long period of time, would have gone to many different things in our budget. But I want to point out one item, the enterprise resource planning, or basically the accounting software that the township has. We're operating with a very old accounting system that is antiquated, and we had discussed this 7 years ago that needed to be replaced, and there just wasn't any money 7 years ago, and then with the recession there was no money. I think this is going to take us a lot further along to what I call e-government services. Essentially, we'll end up with a platform that will allow us to virtualize a lot of the transactions that have to be done in the building. For instance, we envision in the future that you will be able to get a permit online. You will be able to pay for your permits online, your parking tickets, your participation in various Parks and Rec programs. And the idea is that we would improve utilization and activity in the township, more compliance, more utilization. So I'm very much in favor of this investment. It's a lot of money, but I think, can you imagine an app to report a pothole, on your street, or another app that might allow you to enroll your children in some type of camp program? This is what the future will be if we invest, but right now we don't have the infrastructure to do any of that. So I support that investment. I think it'll make Bill's life a lot easier. Right now, the accounting department, the finance department has to do a lot of manual calculations because it's not built into the system. So we're talking about large numbers of spreadsheets and a lot of manual work just to do the budget every year. And I think that's not fair to that department to have to do that manual work every year just to get closer and closer where the new system might be able to do most of that built in. So I support that.
I just have one quick question and then a comment. This recommended allocation does not fund any of the OPEB liabilities. CARFAC recommended that we concentrate on pension. So I was just wondering if, Bill, you would just address that briefly as to what their reasoning was behind concentrating on pension with this money and not OPEB.
Sure, and it's a little preview to the budget presentation that will come right after this discussion, but the primary genesis behind taking those OPEB funds and putting it all towards the pension is, as you'll see, the growth of the pension MMOs over the last 6 and 7 years. That seems to be the area where costs are growing at a rather significant rate per year. So to the extent we can put these dollars towards pension, not only will it help immediately offset the unfunded liability on the balance sheet, but it will also roll through our actuarial assumptions and reduce future years' MMOs. So you kind of get the benefit immediately on the balance sheet, and then in future years you get MMO reductions, provided the rest of the actuarial assumptions are met. So on the other side, dealing with OPEB, meeting those assumptions are a lot more straightforward in terms of predicting where the costs are going based on plans as they exist today. So over time, it seems more realistic that we will meet the OPEB funding plan that's included in the 2014 and subsequent budgets, whereas the more money we can put towards pension, you get the immediate benefit and the benefit in future years as well with reduced MMOs. So that's why those dollars were shifted all towards the pension.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to clarify that this allocation of funding is not to be confused with our excess fund balance policy, which we will be readdressing in the next upcoming meetings while we're discussing the budget. But we do have a separate policy for all excess fund balances every year that has a similar type of allocation. And this is not that, and that is ripe and due for reconsideration since our last policy has expired. So that is a coming attraction.
This is a special allocation, and
Right.
Obviously, and I'm very happy to see that we have stormwater allocation here of $1,230,000. That will get our program started, I'm hoping, because we've got a lot of projects that are waiting for action. And I want to thank Bill and your assistant, and Bob Zinkowski and Bill, and your assistant, Bob Tate, because if it weren't for your diligence, I'm not sure we would have had this settlement of $8 million. I think it's really to your credit that you pushed and persevered and got the taxpayer to agree to live up to its longstanding obligations and give us the $8 million. So thank you.
Is there any other commissioner comment?
I just wanted to mention, John mentioned all the technical reasons why this is a good thing, including improving staff efficiency. There's another thing that you didn't mention, though, and that's called eliminating error-likely situations. In the past, we have had issues where, because of transposition errors or such thing working between the current system and spreadsheets, that we've had some problems. This takes that away.
Any other commissioner comment? Any other staff comment?
It's just, if I could, real briefly, just to expand on Commissioner Fisher's comments with regard to the software, it is absolutely tied to the finance, and the general ledger will certainly be the backbone, but the intention is much broader than just finance. Our goal is to improve how we do work orders in public works, how we issue permits through community development, how we do, and I'm drawing a blank, but it's other business processes that touch all of the other departments. So the general ledger will be the backbone. For example, if we have a work order in public works, one of the goals with this is to be able to tie actual costs to that work order and include payroll and HR components to that as well. So while it will help finance in our system specifically, the goal and the reach is much broader than that. And then the only other comment I have is really the credit lies with Mr. Tate and his. It's an incredible compliment to him and his ability to work with taxpayers, and his approach is delivery is in fairness to both the township and the taxpayer, and he's able to sit down and he really does a terrific job, not only with these types of situations where we're talking about large dollars, but he also delivers the same type of customer service and empathy with every taxpayer, large and small. So really the credit lies with him, and I know we're appreciative to his efforts as well, so thank you.
One comment and one question, because Don and I were just talking, and to echo that, this was a very sophisticated find on the behalf of Bob and the team. And while we really can't get into details, I think he does deserve a public acknowledgement of what he's accomplished here. A question on the pension funds. When will you, because that will be put into the trust and that will be inaccessible to us at the moment you sort of dispense that, correct?
What do you mean by inaccessible?
Well, are you making a cash contribution to the pension funds?
Yes, those dollars will immediately go into those.
Whereas what you put into the stormwater fund, you can pull back and reallocate until you make the financial commitment to do a project.
That is correct,
So
yes.
when are you making the pension fund contribution?
The pension fund contributions would go upon approval of this resolution
So
tonight.
sometime next week, this week?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Okay, any other commissioner comment? Any other staff comment?
Madam President, just to make aware too, I want to thank Bill and Bob Tate. They did a great job working with CARFAC. CARFAC has reviewed this, has gone through this, and have actually arrived, and they actually made some tweaks to this. So CARFAC was very involved with this and looked at this from, again, a financial picture and all the different segments of this. So I just want to recognize CARFAC for their efforts and put input on this as well.
Okay, thanks. All right, any other staff comment or public comment?
Hi, Diane Edbrill, Spruce Tree Road in the Second Ward. You know, I think that it's interesting how universally people have voiced appreciation for and support for the recommendations of CARFAC in regard to this, and I'm fully behind them 100%. I just hope that as you commissioners continue meeting on your regularly scheduled meetings and doing all the business you do, that you also take very seriously and with the same amount of deference CARFAC's recommendations as to open space purchases, because I believe that they have made very clear their position on what should be done in terms of public referendum and spending, going into debt on open space purchases. Thank you.
Diane, that was CBFAC, not CARFAC. CARFAC has not weighed in yet. That's a Phase 2 requirement of our open space policy for CARFAC to weigh in.
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. As a person living on a fixed income now that I am in my later than my mid-70s, I have great concern about our Drossen. I know you have a very long laundry list for this $8 million, and I noticed that in this latest rendition of it that the mainline school night seems to have been dropped. But knowing that all of this is very important, I would also ask you to seriously realize that part of whatever part of our Drossen gets purchased, some of those funds could come out of this $8 million, which would result in less of a financial burden, i.e. a tax increase on your citizens. I only live in Garrett Hill. I've only lived here for 31 years, but I can't count on one hand how many seniors have had to leave our neighborhood because they could no longer afford to live here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, Jim Schneller, St. David's. I think this is a good time to mention two projects I've mentioned over the past 5 years, more than once each, where the fountain at St. David's Park is inoperable. And no one's ever had an answer why. At least I'd ask that you that you weatherize the thing. It's a gorgeous artistic creation. It was put in the park because the park is very noisy traffic-wise, and whoever designed St. David's Park deduced properly that the sound the fountain makes distracts you and eases the mind as you're relaxing in St. David's Park. St. David's Park now enjoys a World Trade Center memorial and about 10 times the public attendance that it did the first year it was built. So is there any way is there a way for us to propose items for what is a modest windfall for things that have public's been waiting for, I think people would come forward with maybe a few dozen. Another item I'm seriously concerned about is the parking lot behind the post office, the library municipal parking lot. The parking lot hasn't been updated in 30 years. It is a barren wasteland. This has contributed, of course, to the flooding over there. But it's right in the middle of our town, and it's a very attractive spot, except for the fact there's not a single traffic island. Even the borders, there's been no planting. There's no canopy trees. There's no nothing. Does the township ever take on projects where you will look at a municipal lot and at least put in 1 or 2, what would be 10 square feet at most for a tree or two in the middle of the lot? Do you know the lot I'm talking about?
It's a good suggestion. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Bob, is there anything we could, Jim, by the way, I think St. David's Park has now been renamed Veterans Park.
Pardon?
Okay.
Is that official?
Is there anything we can do about the fountain there?
Since I've been here 3 years, the fountain hasn't worked. Really, I don't think that fountain was, in my opinion, the appropriate fountain to actually be installed out there. So we will actually redo something that actually is made for outdoor use. So really, the fountain isn't functional at all anymore.
It was contributed.
So I can say is really it.
Is there any other public comment on this issue, the $8 million surplus?
Well,
All right.
before we vote, I'd like to, we use the term CARFAC all the time. Citizens Advisory, Citizens Audit Review and Finance Committee. It's real people,
Almost.
and I'd like to acknowledge who they are. Mark Blair, James Bowes, Carl Bupp, Edward Kane, Laurent Chardonnay, Joseph Ellis, Lee Gormand, Jerry Linden, Michael Antonopoulos, and William White. I mean, I have to apologize, I haven't met most of them, but I have to recognize the fact that they really are great people and have done a wonderful job for us. And we always talk about how good CARFAC is, but we never say who comprises that group, and so now we know. At least
Okay, thank you,
some
Jim.
people know.
And forgive me, I was out of the room. Did this get moved and seconded? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and call the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes 6-0.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2013-131, and it says board approval. Are we actually approving this or just introducing it?
Well, the charter requires that the board actually approve.
Okay.
So that's why it's in resolution form. And we worded it carefully to
saw all that.
emphasize that it's subject to future change.
Okay, and then the only correction then in the printed resolution is in the second whereas clause and the clause that says now therefore, where it says V2, we're doing V1, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So you're going to provide an introductory presentation, but I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2013-131, subject to, the follow-up on the vote of your presentation.
Second.
I'll second it.
You can have it now.
Jennifer Don seconded.
Can I ask a quick question before you start, Bill? In the distant past, not since you've been here, there was generally almost no resemblance between the final budget and the preliminary budget. We haven't seen that with you, and I appreciate that. And I'm assuming this one is pretty close to final also.
Well, it's certainly our intention to deliver to the board and the public a budget that is a lot closer to being fully baked. But obviously, there are things that, in submitting a budget in September or October in this case, obviously things come up after that point prior to December. So, but our intention is to have it as close as we can based on the date and when it's submitted. So, and I'll step through some of the things that have changed even since we submitted it. Take off, okay. So the presentation goals here, the one not listed, and it would be first, is I'll be brief. But we'll step through the major revenue assumptions, expense assumptions, take a quick look at the general fund summary, a quick look at the capital plan, and then the forecast as it relates to the township's recent revenue increases in the Act 511 taxes. So when we take a look at the major revenue assumptions, we'll start by noting that the recommended budget includes no change in the real estate tax rate. So the 3.7511 mils is recommended to stay in place for 2014. That will be the third year that we're at the 3.7511 mils, coming off of the 3 previous years where the increases were approved. And that is, the correlation there is, as you'll see in a moment, increases in business taxes, which have allowed the township to keep that rate flat. And then the pie chart off to the right is just further emphasizing that in terms of millage, the amount that the taxpayers pay to the township is 12% of the total bill, with the other 2 allocations, the school district obviously being the biggest, and then Delaware County even larger than the township. So as it touches on in the budget, if you've had a chance to read it, one of the primary reasons why the township's in a position to continue to offer service and start to address some of its longer-term liabilities without adjusting its millage rate is due to the revenue increases we've experienced or realized through the business privilege tax, which is one of the revenue sources under the Act 511 tax umbrella. And as you can see here, going back to 2010, that those revenues have increased steadily in each of those years. With 2013, there's a spike there, which includes a lump sum payment from a taxpayer to the tune of about $1.5 million that we know we're not going to get on an ongoing basis. So that's why you see 14 coming back down. And the dark line through 13 is roughly where we would estimate the normal 2013 revenue to be at. So that's basically the total revenue minus $1.5 million. And next year's budget assumes a 6% increase over that. And again, the pie chart on the right shows that the real estate taxes represent about 38% of the township's revenue. The Act 511 is now up to 41%, and other revenues are at 21%. I think going back 3 years, that pie chart was basically evenly distributed between those three pieces of the pie. So what's happened in the last 3 years, as the business taxes have grown, it's consumed a larger and larger piece of that pie. We just talked about this, but I wanted to emphasize the impact that the $8 million will have to the 14 budget is in terms of the capital allocation. So basically, we're taking a piece of the $8 million and allocating it towards funding the 2014 capital plan, which otherwise would have required some other revenue source to fund, which again allows the township to keep its tax rate where it's at and still continue to move forward with a capital plan that is built on matching useful life useful lives of the assets that are being acquired with the monies being used to buy them. Instead of buying short-term assets with 30-year bonds, this allows us to implement a more of a pay-as-you-go type of capital program where either we're paying cash for the assets or we're matching some sort of lease program with the actual life of the vehicle. So those are the 3 major revenue assumptions. Again, that's real estate taxes remaining where they're at, the Act 511 increases, and then the $8 million. So jumping over to the major expense assumptions, and there's 3 of these that'll be highlighted here. First, and this speaks to comments that were made earlier in the evening regarding the township's full-time employee count dropping from 155 in 2006 down to 121 for 2013. And the 2014 budget assumes the same staffing counts as we have, or head counts as we have now, which also includes replacing the 2 uniformed officers that did not make it through the FTO program, so those positions are currently vacant. So this assumes refilling those positions as well. This was also discussed earlier this evening and has been in our discussions over the last 2 or 3 years regarding our pension. So the table here, I think, does a really good job of emphasizing 3 points. First of all, looking at the far right column, the net township expense column, you can see that in 2008, the township's net expense for pensions, and this is the MMO, our minimum municipal obligation, is after we received the state aid, was $711,000 and some change, and that has grown to the 2014 estimate being 3.6 million roughly. And so, again, that goes back to why it seems more prudent to take as much of the excess dollars today and assign it to pension to help address this growing issue, because this is the issue that is growing, whereas OPEB's a little bit more of a fixed cost type of program. We just have to start funding it. The other two aspects that I thought were interesting when I first looked at this is, first, that the uniform plan back in 2008, roughly $522,000 versus $840,000 for the civilian, that the police has now caught up in terms of cost and actually exceeds the civilian plan, in spite of the fact that it only has about 2/3 of the participants. So that speaks to the cost of providing the benefit levels to those employees versus the growth on the civilian side. And then the other aspect is that, and this isn't unusual for Radnor or basically any other type of state aid, but we can count on over the long term, that number probably not growing too much. As you can see, it was $650,000 in 08, $628,000 is the estimate for next year. We did have the one year where the state changed its collection procedure, and we did get the $985,000. But as the state told us, that was going to be a one-time anomaly. The other major expense assumption, and we've talked about this as well over the last 2 years, and we've worked with CARFAC in not only identifying the problem, quantifying the problem, and defining the problem, but now moving towards implementing a solution, at least in terms of putting aside a funding plan. And this cannot be discussed without also mentioning, and this was brought up earlier tonight, affecting the other side of the program, and that's the benefit levels as well. What the graph you're looking at is showing is the yellow line would be if the township implemented the full annual required contribution, and that's calculated by the actuarial assumptions associated with the benefit. And as you can see, going from where we're at today of roughly $2 million, a little bit more than that, it would require a $3 million increase in annual funding to that to get to the full arc. So you have the immediate cost spike, but you have a shorter horizon until you reach full funding, which would be roughly 2036, where you see the yellow line drop back down. So instead, where it's unrealistic to assume that we can implement or find $3 million annually to start funding that, we discussed and reviewed several funding options back in the spring, one of which was a 10-year phase-in. So what you can see for the first 10 years of the program, and now I'm referring to the red line, is incrementally $200,000 per year being added to funding adding over and above the pay-as-you-go number. So we're at roughly $2 million now, 10 years, $200,000 a year, adding another $2 million to that, so we'll be roughly $4 million. And then what happens, so starting in year 11 all the way out to 2041-ish, is just the annual incremental increase in the premiums for the medical benefits. And then on the back end of the program, you could see the red line ramps itself back down. You don't have the dramatic from 1 year to the next cost decrease. So what the plan proposes is that on the back end, you incrementally decrease the funding over a period of time until you reach full funding, which in this case, all assumptions considered, is roughly 2059. But the 2014 budget does include year one an additional $200,000 in OPEB funding, and the financial forecast that's also included in the budget document includes the incremental increases over the next 5 years for the the financial forecast. But if the forecast was 10 years, it'd show all 10.
If I can just interrupt for one
Sure.
little input here. We've said this many times, and I just want to remind everyone again that to the extent in our excess fund balance policy that we make cash payments towards these liabilities each year, they will go toward bringing that to 2059 date closer.
That would be correct. Yeah, we would, the plan would, well, the recommendation is that any excess dollars go to be in addition to the annual contribution.
Right.
Which will shorten the horizon, as would reductions in benefits or if the investments do better than the assumption, which in this case is 4.5%, not the 7.5% that's tied to pension. So a quick look at the general fund summary, and I'll qualify quickly that the 2014 numbers have changed slightly since we distributed the budget 2 weeks ago. The revenue numbers are the same, and the expense numbers have come down slightly as a result of several factors, a couple changes in personnel, as well as the actual 2014 medical premiums came in a few percentage points under what they told us that it was going to be. So all of those changes were in a positive direction. But again, you could see a couple things that to take away from this table is, first of all, on the revenue side, the impact that in the growth of the Act 511 taxes over this 5-year period has been rather dramatic. And what's not shown, more because of space than any other reason, but in 2009, the Act 511 taxes were significantly lower than the 9.7 you see in 2010. And that was obviously a result of the recession and the drop in gross receipts from both the business privilege and the mercantile side. The other item that we take away from, or that at least I took away from this table as I was putting it together, was the growth on the benefit side when you're taking a look at the township's expenses. And you can see that with the incorporation of the OPEB funding plan, as well as the MMO increases over time, that the benefit expense has increased significantly over this 5-year period. The one other note I'll make on this, and it was actually brought up when this information was presented to the staff, it was a very observant staff member that asked this question, is taking a look at the benefit line from 13 to 2014, it appears to drop by $2 million. And what is happening there is 2013 is capturing the one-time movement of prior year's excess fund balance out of the general fund over to OPEB and pension. So that's a one-time movement of funds that we won't see in future years. But at the same time, I wanted to show it as an expense related to benefits, so we included it here. So that's the summary for the general fund revenues and expenses. Taking a quick look at the capital program, this just shows the distribution of how those funds are allocated to be spent next year. Again, this will be an allocation of funds as these different items are projected to be spent, or when it comes time to spend these dollars, they will come back in front of the board for specific board approval on the various items. So adoption of the budget is not authorization to spend the capital funds on these items. And the one note with the infrastructure improvements is it includes sanitary sewer, the road resurfacing, and then signals and signs. At this point, going back 2 weeks ago, we did not have the stormwater information adopted yet, so it was not included in these numbers. In the future versions of the budget, that will be included in here as well. So just a real quick look at the forecast. As we were reviewing the budget, and this is one of the things that we discussed with CARFAC as they reviewed the budget, is the sensitivity to future expenses based on how Act 511 revenues do. So if we assume a more pessimistic outlook on those revenues, and that is to say they were to be flat or even in some cases reduce or decrease over the next 5 years, the impact of the township's millage rate would look something like the red line shown here. And what is happening in 16 and 18, where you see the big jumps, is future assumptions on what happens with the township's MMO based pension. That's the township's pension obligation based on historical information. But conversely, if the Act 511 revenues continue to come in at the rate they have for the last 4 years, the forecast changes dramatically. And again, the variations you're seeing from year to year is the impact to the MMO, or the expense jumping up in 16 and 18 for the MMO. But the millage rate, again, is something that's appears to be much more manageable. And like I mentioned in prior presentations where we're taking a look at the forecasted numbers, these aren't meant to be actual predictions on where the millage rate's going to be in those years, but instead to just show the relationship of the importance that the Act 511 revenues are having on our forecast. And and at some point, what we'll do is we'll incorporate the very first forecast presentation to what things look like now, and you can see the difference. And again, while a lot of the expenses have changed, the Act 511 has been considerable, or is kind of clouding the whole forecast issue. One other note with reference to the Act 511 revenues, and I think this is worth mentioning in the terms of full risk disclosure, is the Act 511 revenues can be volatile year to year based on what happens with a larger economic conditions that we have absolutely no control over, nor do we have a whole lot of advance notice. Taxes are filed and paid a year in arrears, so our information is always lagging. And those we've seen from 2008 to 2009, we saw the business privilege taxes drop by approximately $3 million from one year to the next. So what is happening in essence is the township's benefiting from a volatile revenue source, but yet our expenses are fixed. So we're still in that precarious position of having somewhat revenues that are subject to large volatility versus expenses that are a lot more fixed and on a straight line as you forecast them out. So that's only worth mentioning in terms of as we move forward, things to keep in mind in terms of the township's financial position. So,
If I may, Bill, again, I think this goes to show the importance of economic development as well and redevelopment. Again, to shift this, and I think what Bill showed earlier in a graph, to where it's changing to where you have more relying on business, less onto the taxpayer, which I think is the trend, which from my perspective, given the liabilities we have, is a continued trend. So you may see why I'm a little more aggressive on that end, because you can see the opportunities, as well as continuing what the Board of Commissioners have done, asking for a lot of these developers who are coming in to improve the infrastructure, which again, they are going to have impacts upon roads, sewers, that we continue that, and the board continues to push on that developers, when they come in, that they make the investment into the infrastructure, which is, again, is less dollars we as taxpayers have to invest into this or go back to taxpayers and ask them for higher taxes to help pay for those.
So yeah, just to wrap it up, what's included on the budget calendar right now are 3 public hearings, 2 in November and then 1 in December prior to the adoption of the ordinances. I think the version of the budget that was published 2 weeks ago also has a November 4th public hearing date. That was part of an initial program that we've since taken out. So if you're looking at the budget as it was submitted 2 weeks ago online and you see November 4th on the calendar, strike that. The first hearing is intended to be on November 11th.
The November 18th is a special meeting?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, are you all done? Okay.
Yes, I am all done.
Is there, very nice job. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. The budget is beautiful. I mean, it's really a tremendous, tremendous job when you look at the budgets that this township used to get every year before this administration came in. It really is, relatively, it is a work of art, comparatively. So thank you for all the work that goes into it, to you and to your staff. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Okay, are there any other staff comments or questions? Any public comment? Okay, it has been moved and seconded. I'm going to go ahead and take a vote for the approval of this 2014 recommended budget. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And it passes 6-0. All right, do we have anything from Parks and Rec? John and Tammy?
Two quick items. One I wanted to mention, I'm sure you all remember last year that students at St. Catherine's did some investigation of the veterans that were on the War Memorial. That program has been continued, and this year they have worked on 9 Vietnam-era vets, and those displays are going to be set up very shortly. Marty actually showed me them. They're in the back of the room. This is a phenomenal program because not only does it honor those veterans, but it helps the young people understand the cost of freedom and, you know, what it took to provide this country what it has. And Marty also asked that I remind you, and I also remind you personally as a veteran, that November 11th, 11 o'clock is Veterans Day. Make sure to honor it. Tammy, I'll turn it over to you for your announcements.
Thank you, Commissioner Nagel. I wanted to take an opportunity just to thank everybody who participated in the events that we had in October. We had a very busy month. We had a great event at the beginning of October on the 6th that happened at the Willows Park. It was the Great Pumpkin Patch Fall Harvest event. We had over 4,000 people that actually attended, despite the bridges that are out currently. So I wanted to take an opportunity to thank everybody that came out and participated. We really had an excellent day. We also had a trick-or-treat event that happened here at the Township Building this past Friday. And it was great. Kids were able to come into the Township Building here and trick-or-treat to all the different departments, and a lot of the departments and the staff participated and dressed up. It was really a great event. We approximated about 125, 150 people that actually came this year, so that's been growing over the last few years. And then this past Sunday, we had the Radnor Run that had 674 participants that took place. It was a great day. We had great weather, no snow this year, no rain this year, finally. And I just wanted to thank everybody who participated. I wanted to thank all of the sponsors, of course, that make these events possible, of course, with the funding, and all the commissioners that have taken part and that have supported these events and coming out to them and representing them. On Friday night, we had our sponsorship reception, actually, that took place for the Radnor Run. Commissioner Higgins, I just wanted to thank you for attending that. And also, we have various Parks and Recreation Board members that come out to those events as well and support us, so I want to thank them for taking part. Just one more announcement is that the Radnor Youth Basketball Program, which usually tallies about 1,000 to 1,200 participants, is actually open for registration. So if you have young kids that want to participate in the program, we actually have it new this year for kindergartners. We opened up our Hoops League, Hoops Clinic program for the kindergarten ages, and that program runs all the way to 12th grade. So it's open for registration. You can jump online, of course, call our department, and we'll be able to help you through that process. Thank you.
Tammy, did you say 4,000 people came to that event?
We estimated about 4,000 people came to the Fall Harvest and Great Pumpkin Patch event.
That's amazing. That's an eighth of our township.
It was incredible.
Wow, great job.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Yes, several commissioners were there and seemed to enjoy it. Don was serenading us on his ukulele. That was fun. Yeah. Also, I wanted to mention for those who go over to Willows Park, there was quite a kerfuffle a month or two ago when the crews did some weed removal. We have planted 71 new trees along the stream, and in the spring, hopefully, with the help of the volunteers and the organizations in the township, we will continue with the planting program more with shrubby type items. And thanks to the parks crews for doing that work, Bob. And the report.
Okay, Commissioner Jim Higgins, is there anything from the library?
No report tonight.
Public Health, Commissioner Nagel, anything from Public Health?
Nothing at this time. They will be having public hearings coming up regarding Mainline Health's plans with their thoracic surgery unit at Bryn Mawr Hospital. So I'd advise everyone to stay tuned and note those dates. We need to hear from the public to let Mainline Life and Mainline Health know how we feel about that.
Okay, Public Works, Jim? Anything?
No report tonight.
Madam President, if I may, just
Sure.
on Public Works, just briefly, I just want to recognize our trash crew. Number of years ago, at the highest peak, the trash department had 36 full-time employees, 6 part-time employees. Today, they are at 16 full-time and 6 part-time. So there's been a reduction there in 20 full-time staff, and they continue to keep doing a good job. So I just want to recognize them. A lot of times they're not recognized, but because of the heat and the cold and the temperatures, the rain, they continue to do a great job.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a report for community development, Don? Okay. Any old business? Nope, no old business. Okay, new business, we have one item. About a month ago, this board held a conditional use hearing on the use of our density modification for the property at 115 Strafford Avenue. And we have a decision and an order to present tonight. And our solicitor will go ahead and do that. Before he does, I'd like to know if, invite any public comment about that hearing that anyone might want to give tonight. Go ahead.
Are we going to be able to make public comment on the decision?
Well, I prefer that you make it now. That, I mean, the decision's not up for discussion. It's decision's made. There's an order already made. So you can,
You couldn't make the decision until you vote on it.
well, right.
There's a proposed decision that the board has in front of them. I think now would be the time for public comment because the hearing's closed on the conditional use decision. All the testimony, all the evidence, all the legal argument, all the other type of argument was all to be done the night of the hearing on the record. This decision is no different than a judge in Delaware County Court issues a decision. There is no debate, it just gets issued. So the board's obligation is to make a decision within a certain amount of time. Tonight's tonight. So I have provided tonight through email both attorneys in the room with a copy of the order. I don't know whether one of them has his smartphone with him, but I did provide that. So they have some advance information tonight. And Mr. Brosman's representing the applicant. He has an opportunity to comment before you vote on this.
Great.
Good evening, George Brosman representing the applicant. With me is Bo Erickson with the applicant entity. John, a few minutes ago, did email me just the order part, which I was able to read on my iPhone. I think I could read it. I just wanted to make public comment, and Bo will chime in on some of the conditions that we saw and ask you to consider as you move forward, possibly modifying those. Number one, the recommendation of the Shade Tree Commission, we would just ask that that be simplified to say that the trees would not be removed unless as recommended by the Shade Tree Commission or the arborist, rather than saying what the reasons for removal would be. We believe we have their support. Number four has to do with the open space. There's 15% open space required here. At the hearing, there was testimony regarding a stormwater management system that we propose that will be completely underground and would not affect the use of the open space. And there's been discussion about how we can make that system bigger than is required. And we see there's a condition that, as we're reading it, it's basically saying that our entire open space, as I'm interpreting it, is being considered as a stormwater management system. We don't think that's accurate. It's underground, and we think that it should not be deducted. There's nothing in the ordinance, in our view, that gives you that authority, and there's nothing in the ordinance that says that we cannot have the underground stormwater system underneath the open space area. And Bo wanted to speak very briefly about how, as a practical matter, we think that condition may be contradictory to the goals that we've been asked to do, which is to make the stormwater a lot better than it is there today.
Yeah, and in our 7 months working with the township, stormwater was identified as a potential problem here. And we have looked at it very extensively and looked at it at what we can do. We can obviously meet the code. We can meet the code if you net out the area above our basin. But we want to go well beyond that. We want to design a system that is probably one of the best you've ever seen in Radnor, that would hold most of our water on our site all the time. But this one condition basically is pushing us to make it smaller, which to me is counterintuitive. We want to help the neighbors. We want to hold as much water on our property as we can, and this one condition steers us in the other direction. We can still comply, but why put a condition that basically makes us have more water go off-site when we're willing to keep it on our site? And that's why I think that condition should be eliminated. And as George said, there's nothing in the ordinance. This stormwater system is below grade. There's 4 feet of cover over it. There's grass over it. It's in the nicest piece of our property that we're protecting for the neighbors to keep it as a green space. And I think that one condition is counterintuitive.
And then the last one, condition 5, we don't know exactly what it means. It says to connect our system to a point as shown on a township exhibit from the conditional use hearing. That sounds to me like it's going to be interpreted to say that we're going to have to replace pipe that's off of our property. That's an off-site improvement that we cannot be required to do. Also that we would follow what the township engineer says during land development. We'll work closely with the township engineer, but we can't have a condition that would say we would do whatever he says. We have to be bound by the ordinances, and we don't think he should be given that complete discretion. We'll work closely with him. So we would ask that you take these matters into advisement. We worked hard with the neighbors to come up with a plan that's acceptable. We're afraid that these conditions, particularly the number 4, if interpreted literally, may jeopardize the whole concept, and the neighbors will get no open space. They won't get this incredible landscaping plan that we have done. And we may be back to the drawing board. If we're not on appeal with this, we may be back to the drawing board with a plan that is nowhere as good as this. And we would appreciate your consideration of these points.
Thank
Thank you very much. Jim, did you want to make comments?
Members of the board, Jim Greenfield on behalf of the Strafford office buildings, and my client John Fuchs is with me this evening. Strafford office buildings is a property that sits on the, just to the north, contiguous to the subject property immediately to the north. And we know that there have been extensive negotiations between the developer and the residential neighbors to the east, and that the developer has made some significant concessions that are designed to protect those neighbors, but nothing has been done for the neighbor to the north, which is the office buildings. And in fact, this plan not only would implicate the removal of trees to the north along the boundary with Mr. Fuchs's property, but also would allow no space at all to do any plantings there. And in fact, this plan leaves only 5 feet of space north of the driveway in which plantings could be accomplished, and that simply is not going to be enough space to do any landscaping, let alone the creation of an adequate buffer to protect the office buildings. Also, I wanted to show you something here. We understand that the record is closed. Can we put this up by any chance?
It's public comment, Mr. Greenfield. It's not time to put on additional testimony and evidence. It's really going to be up to the board whether they want to hear this. This is not part of the record. You understand, your client understands that, correct?
We do understand that.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Our purpose in showing the board the plan that's up right now is to demonstrate that one of the arguments made by the developer may have been a faulty premise. The developer, I think, argued that because the overall property is slightly in excess of 2 acres, and in fact about 92,000 square feet, and because ordinarily the requirement in R4 is 7,000 square feet for a single-family residential lot. Based on that, the developer contended that it could put 13 or maybe 12 single-family residential homes on this property. And I believe that after that argument was made, this board asked the developer to provide a plan that would support that contention, and I don't think that was ever supplied. Mr. Fuchs asked Chester Valley engineers to prepare a plan and charged the engineers to come up with the maximum possible single-family residential development for this property. And the plan that's on the screen is what they came up with. It is a 7-lot plan, not a 12 or 13-lot plan. This is a difficult site. The way it's configured would make it very difficult to maximize the yield for single family. So what you would have had here is 7 lots, meaning that the 11 townhomes that are proposed under this conditional use application would in effect be a 57% increase in the density on the property, not a decrease. So we wanted to make those points to the boards, that the board realizes that this is a difficult, this is a very intensive development for this property, and it does not take care of all the neighbors. And so I think it's section 28095A4 notes that in density modification, landscaping is essential to every development plan. We don't think landscaping is anywhere close to being complete, and our big concern is that under this application, it's not going to be possible to adequately landscape to the north. Anything you want to add, John? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, John.
I'd point out to the board, and Mr. Greenfield certainly knows, as does Mr. Brosman, that what's in front of the board tonight is just a conditional use decision with some conditions. And that ultimately, assuming that application gets implemented, there's a land development plan that has to come back in front of this board, which includes a lot more detail than what you've seen up to this point, if this goes forward. So tonight is just to set the zoning, some parameters of the zoning, and some of the parameters of the proposed density modification. So with that, if the board would like me to go through the proposed order, unless
We have
there's...
one more item of public comment, and then we'll do that.
Hi, Board. Leslie Morgan, 12 Farm Road. 25 of our neighbors, one lives in Canada, though, but communicated through email, absolutely wanted something a little different in the beginning. And because of your suggestion to have townhouses and the zoning board's demand, and especially Jim's continued demand that we negotiate, we did. And we thought we really came up as a neighborhood. Neighborhoods don't always want to fall into line, as you know, and you've seen so many applications, and it was very hard for us. But through the time, we came up with what we thought were some really cool ideas that were also trends going through the whole township, such as creating open space venues that link with maybe the buffers and density modifications so that you can actually get impact. And then with that, we created a street view that's there, and I think there's some deed restrictions on that, so that we created this free, what I call commuter shed. And for us, it is a view shed. It is not a view shed for the cars, it is a commuter shed. So we thought that was very interesting with this plan. Secondarily, dearly, and I know Jim in his heart loves stormwater. I myself don't get flooded much, but a lot of my neighbors do. And a lot of it's downstream, as they say, down by the Wawa. It's been on Channel 6 a lot. So this property doesn't cause that. We learned through the process what does cause that, and we really thought it was unique for a neighborhood to come up with our attorney and land use person that we hired some conditions of our own and sort of did your job for you. And we would hardly want to be, I guess, put this on hold because we made something bigger and better. And I think if it can be proven that the stormwater is protected, the container, the box, they call it, if it can be proven that the extra size in the box is a good thing, and it's down deep, and we have lovely landscaping around it, maybe not so lovely to John, and I'm sorry, then why would this plan be penalized? Because then you're going to, we have the stormwater fee, but you're saying you don't want the stormwater, enlargement. And I would think that this is just so parallel to what you just asked people to pay fees for that it wouldn't seem to make sense. And so maybe you could consider that. And if the applicant has to prove the depth or the, the volume, and that it actually is a better system, then I think that that's a reasonable request. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment about this? Okay, John, I think we're ready to hear the order.
Okay, the proposed order that's in front of the board is an approval of the proposed use subject to 6 conditions. 6 conditions. Number 1, that all existing mature trees on site be preserved unless the Shade Tree Commission and/or the township's arborist determines that the trees are diseased or otherwise unable to be preserved as part of the proposed project. Number 2, applicant would install sidewalks and curbing along the property's Strafford Avenue road frontage in order to connect with existing sidewalks on Strafford Avenue. 3, hardscape sidewalks and curbing shall be installed along the main drive access road to the site from Strafford Avenue in a location to be approved by the township engineer. 4, applicant would not receive credit for the proposed .320 acres of common open space for its required open space calculation due to the presence of structural and non-structural BMPs, inlet drains, and other areas underlying with stormwater piping in this area, and the applicant would have to provide additional open space of .320 acres within the site. 4, the applicant shall connect its proposed stormwater system to an off-site connection point as set forth on Township Exhibit T4 and as directed by the township engineer during the land development process. And 6, the applicant would pay the outstanding shade tree ordinance violations as set forth on Township Exhibit T1 in the amount of $7,000. That was an outstanding shade tree violation by the existing legal owner, not by this applicant, but the existing legal owner that was unresolved, and that was discussed during the hearing. They're the conditions. What's in front of the board is an approval vote subject to those conditions.
Can I have a motion for the approval?
So moved.
Second?
John, a question. If, the applicant obviously has raised some concerns, if he disagrees with whatever the outcome is here, what recourse does he have?
He or Mr. Fuchs, either one of them, have the right to appeal this decision. I heard Mr. Greenfield
Appeal to?
Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. I mean, this is not unlike a zoning hearing board decision. It's exactly the same in terms of the planning code. It's just a different body making this decision. But either party, any party can appeal this decision that was in front of the board.
John, I have a question also. Condition 4 is very specific about .320 acres because that is what was presented to us during the hearing. So if they want to double the size of their system, does it naturally double the number here, or is it only the original 3.2 or .32?
Well, I think the .32 is the decision is disqualified from counting as open space. So
if he wanted to do much more, there's no effect?
correct.
Okay. So you still lose the .32, but you don't lose future changes. Could you come up to the mic, please? No.
I think that doesn't, the .32 is the 15% open space that we are required to provide. That's what the .32 is. We're providing on the existing plan more than that. Now, we can provide the required open space, and we can have our stormwater system, the area above it deducted, and we could comply with that. But we want to expand our stormwater system to make it bigger. It's underground, nobody will ever see it. But if that expanded area is deducted, yes, then we would be we wouldn't be providing as much open space with all the deductions that is required. And we could do that, but then we can't give you the stormwater system I've been trying to give to the township and to the residents. So that's where this plan can go forward, but it will go forward not as well as it could have if this ordinance or this condition remains. And that's why I think it's counterintuitive.
Thanks for that
Is
clarification.
there any other commissioner comment? All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote.
Actually, I'd like to offer an amendment to the order that we strike condition 4.
Second.
Let me hear your logic.
My logic is if there are no depressions such that it's a level field, that it does not impair the ability of folks to use it as described in the density modification ordinance, which, by the way, includes stormwater systems. It's wetlands.
Wetlands.
Wetlands. I
Not
think
infrastructure.
I think he's meeting the intent of the stormwater ordinance, but or the density modification ordinance. But I think more important is that he is proposing to exceed the requirements and really offer something positive to the community.
Well, I appreciate that. My issue with this, I'd have to disagree with you. My issue is that the reason that on this site, the open space is we're being requested to count the part on top of the stormwater infrastructure as open space is because there's not enough room for both open space and infrastructure. And that is the trouble with trying to use an ordinance like this on a site like this. It can be done, but there's too much on the site right now, including the infrastructure for the open space. So I would have to disagree, and I will not support that amendment.
Yeah, I'm not going to support it either for similar logic, unfortunately.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have any other comments? Okay. This is on the amendment that John Nagel just put forth. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Nay. It fails 2 to 4. Okay, we have the underlying motion to approve the order as drafted. Was moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Passes 4 to 2. Okay, that's it. We now have public participation.
Sarah Pilling from Garrett Hill. I believe it's the policy when a meeting is a public meeting that it should be, the agenda should be put up on the web ahead of time. If the Board of Health is going to have these very important discussions about Bryn Mawr, then their agendas should be up on the website prior to the meeting. I have developed an interest in the Board of Health, and some of the things are going on. And in 2013 was one meeting where the agenda was put up, 1 in 12, and it goes back to 2011. So I would like to request that all boards who have a public meeting have their agendas up ahead of time so that we know what is going to be discussed. Thank Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah, I just might like to tell you, I already informed the chair of that board the necessity to both put up the agenda and also to publish minutes.
I agree with you.
Right. I mean, it's a charter requirement.
But they're not doing it.
Yeah.
Okay, any other public comment? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
All in favor? We're adjourned.